I caught my sister and fiancé kissing in his office 4 weeks before our wedding. Now she's begging me to save her from the marriage she destroyed mine for. My name is Seraphina Wilson. I found myself standing at my mother's funeral, dreading the arrival of my sister Isolde. She snatched Cassian, my billionaire fiancé, the man I intended to spend my life with. I had not seen either of them since. When Isolde strolled in, flashing her diamond ring and smiling smugly, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't expected. She had no idea who was there to meet her. Before I tell you how my sister's face turned white as a sheet when she saw who I married, please let me know where you're watching from and click the subscribe button to follow my trip. My mother, Agnes, was always the glue that kept our family together. Growing up in a small suburban home outside of Boston, she was the one who taught me about courage and decency. We enjoyed a special bond that grew stronger as I got older. Even after I moved into my own downtown Boston apartment and established myself as a marketing executive, I contacted her practically daily. She was my confidant, advisor, and biggest supporter. When Mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I felt my entire world crumble. Despite the severe therapies, we felt our time was limited. Mother handled her diagnosis with surprising grace, caring more about her family's well-being than her own sorrow. Her final weeks were spent peacefully, surrounded by loved ones at the home where Mom raised us. She slid away, holding my hand, after making me swear to find serenity in my life. When I was 32, my life appeared to be wonderful on paper. I had a career, friends, and a great apartment, but there was something lacking. I worked 60-hour weeks and dated periodically, but nothing serious happened. Then I met Cassian Reynolds at a charity event through my college buddy Celeste. Cassian exuded charisma, gorgeous teeth, and confidence that permeated the room. He was a self-made IT millionaire with a success story that media loved to feature. Our bond was immediate. We had a passion for art, travel, and ambitious objectives. After our first meeting at an expensive restaurant overlooking the bay, I contacted my mother to tell her I had met someone amazing. Our bond developed swiftly. Weekend excursions to Martha's Vineyard, box seats at symphony concerts, and romantic meals became our norm. Cassian was attentive and generous, constantly bringing nice gifts and arranging elaborate dates. Cassian proposed with a 5-carat diamond ring after 18 months of dating, over a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor. I agreed without hesitation. My parents were overjoyed, particularly my mother, who immediately began planning the ideal wedding. Cassian has the resources to make any wedding dream come true, and Agnes insisted we don't hold back. Then there was my younger sister Isolde. We had a complex connection, despite being only 2 years younger than me. We were close as children, despite the constant competition. Isolde constantly desired what I had, whether it was toys, friends, or attention. If I accomplished something, she had to equal or exceed it. Mother always attempted to maintain the peace by providing each of us individual time and attention. Regardless of our history, I chose Isolde as my maid of honor. Mother said it would bring us closer, and I hoped that as adults, we had progressed past infantile jealousy. When I presented Isolde to Cassian at a family meal, she showered him with compliments. I spotted her caressing his arm while smiling at his jokes, but dismissed it as Isolde's typical charming behavior. We hosted our engagement party at my parents' colonial-style home. Isolde assisted Mother with decorations, including stringing fairy lights throughout the backyard and placing flowers. I spotted Isolde staring at Cassian across the room all evening. But when our gazes met, she suddenly smiled and raised her glass to me. Later that night, once the guests left, Mother approached me in the kitchen. "Seraphina, dear. I noticed Isolde seems quite taken with Cassian," she murmured, gently placing leftover appetizers in containers. "She's just being friendly, Mom," I explained, rinsing champagne flutes in the sink. "Besides, she's dating that pharmaceutical rep Brian." Mother nodded, but did not appear convinced. "Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can get when you have something she admires." I kissed her cheek and assured her that everything was okay. "We're adults now, Mom. Isolde's happy for me. I'm sure of it." How mistaken I was. How awful and devastatingly incorrect. 3 months before our wedding, I began to notice tiny changes in Cassian. He began working later, frequently responding texts at unusual hours using the pretext of international clients. Our regular Friday date nights were regularly canceled owing to emergency meetings. When we were together, he appeared inattentive, continually checking his phone and paying just limited attention to our chats. More disturbing was how he began to criticize aspects of me that he had previously admired. My laughter was suddenly too loud in public. My favorite blue dress, which he always liked, suddenly made me appear washed out. Even my habit of reading before bed, which he had previously thought sweet, became bothersome due to the light keeping him awake. Meanwhile, Isolde began calling more frequently, always inquiring about wedding details. "I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister," she'd tell me. Though mother did the majority of the organizing, Isolde volunteered to assist with vendor meetings that I couldn't attend owing to work obligations. Cassian and I went to supper at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown on a Thursday evening. He rarely made eye contact and responded to my work-related stories with one-word answers. When his phone rang for the 7th time, I had reached my limit. "Is there something more important going on elsewhere?" I inquired, attempting to maintain a pleasant tone despite my mounting displeasure. "Sorry, just work stuff," he muttered, setting his phone face down on the table. "You know how it is before a product launch." Later that week, when washing the laundry, I detected an odd perfume on Cassian's collar. It was flowery and thick, unlike the faint scent I wore. When confronted, Cassian said that he had spent the entire day meeting with a potential investor, Seraphina Mills, who appeared to be wearing excessive perfume and embraced him farewell. The explanation appeared plausible. I wanted to believe him. I called my buddy Celeste to convey my concerns about coffee the next morning. "Every relationship gets jittery before the wedding," Celeste assured me as she stirred her cappuccino. "Parker and I fought constantly the month before our wedding, and now we've been married 5 years." However, the knot in my stomach refused to dissolve. My mother observed my worry at our usual lunch. "You seem distracted, sweetheart," she murmured, reaching across the table and touching my hand. "Wedding stress or something else?" I forced a smile. "Just busy with the final arrangements, everything's fine." But everything was not fine. I began to exert more effort, thinking that perhaps I had been taking Cassian for granted. I scheduled a spa day, purchased new lingerie, and tried preparing his favorite foods. He grew increasingly aloof as I tried harder. Then came the cake tasting appointment, which Cassian had been looking forward to for weeks. That morning, he called, claiming to have an unexpected meeting with investors. "Isolde can go with you," he said. "She knows my preferences anyway." When I hung up, I felt ill. How did my sister know about my fiancé's cake choices better than I did? Still, I accepted her invitation to join me. The next day, when cleaning Cassian's car before a dinner party, I discovered an earring trapped between the passenger seat and the center console. I immediately recognized the dangling silver earring with a small sapphire as Isolde's. My sister had worn the earrings to my engagement party, a gift from our grandma. When I showed Cassian the earring that evening, his expression remained completely poised. "Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist last week," he remarked softly. "She mentioned losing an earring." "You never told me you drove Isolde to the florist," I remarked quietly. "Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind. It wasn't important." When I called Isolde, her explanation was exactly the same as his. "Oh, thank goodness. I've been looking everywhere for that earring. Cassian was kind enough to drive me since my car was in the shop." That night I couldn't sleep because thoughts were flying through my head. Had they prepared their story? Was I paranoid? Stress caused me to lose weight and develop dark bags under my eyes. I started going to a therapist without telling Cassian. Cassian proposed we postpone the wedding 3 weeks in advance. "I'm worried about you, Seraphina. You're not yourself lately. Maybe we're rushing things." I broke down and begged him to tell me what was wrong, what I had done, and how I could cure it. He embraced me and assured me that everything was all right. But his eyes were vacant. That night, I awoke at 3 a.m. to find Cassian's side of the bed deserted. From the hallway, I could hear his whispered words from the guest bedroom. "Not now, she'll hear us." I know. Soon, I promise." The next day I planned to surprise Cassian at his office with lunch. My father Edric called while I was leaving my apartment. "Seraphina, are you eating properly? Your mother says you've lost too much weight. We're concerned." "I'm fine, Dad." "Really? Just pre-wedding jitters. I'm actually bringing Cassian lunch right now." "Good. That boy better be treating my daughter like a queen." If only he knew. The security guy at Cassian's building recognized me and waved me through with a smile. On the elevator trip to the 12th level, I examined my reflection in the mirrored wall, attempting to smooth the worry creases that had formed between my eyebrows. The lunch bag in my hand contained Cassian's favorite sandwich from the deli across the street from my workplace. When I arrived at the reception area, Cassian's secretary, Odette, looked up from her computer, her eyes widening in surprise. "Seraphina, we weren't expecting you today." Her attention shifted to Cassian's closed office door, and then back to me. Cassian is in a meeting right now. That's okay, I said, lifting the lunch bag. I just brought him lunch, I can wait. Odette rose fast, blocking my route. Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could let him know you're here. Something in her uneasy demeanor raised my concerns. Is he alone in there, Odette? Her hesitancy revealed all. Before she could react, I moved past her and opened Cassian's office door. Cassian was leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, her arms wrapped around his neck, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Neither noticed me at first, leaving me several agonizing seconds to process every aspect. Isolde's skirt pushed up, Cassian's tie loosened, and their embrace was familiar, evoking countless previous occasions. When the door clicked shut behind me, they sprung apart, three faces frozen in amazement. Seraphina, Cassian recovered first, fixing his tie. This isn't what it looks like. Isolde did not even try such a blatant falsehood. Instead, she raised her chin defiantly. We didn't plan this. It just happened. The tranquility that swept over me was unexpected. How long? Cassian cast a peek at Isolde before returning his attention to me. Seraphina, let's discuss this privately. How long? My voice was steady. For months, Isolde replied. Since the engagement party. For months. Almost half of our engagement. While I was choosing wedding invitations and floral arrangements, they betrayed me. Cassian stepped behind his desk, separating himself as if prepared for a business meeting. I did not intend for this to happen, Seraphina. Sometimes feelings shift. I was planning to tell you after. After what? What happens after the wedding? What happens after our honeymoon? I was trying to find the right time. His voice had the practiced smoothness he used for difficult client meetings. The lunch bag fell from my grasp. I trusted you. Both of you. Isolde at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Becca, it simply occurred. We tried to fight it. Don't call me Becca. The childhood moniker seemed like a trespass. Nothing just happens. For 4 months you made decisions. Each hidden call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye, you knew what you were doing. Cassian pressed the intercom button. Odette, please come in. Odette appeared moments later, carefully avoiding my eyes. Please take Seraphina outside. She is upset. I'm escorting myself out, I responded, retaining my dignity but feeling devastated inside. You deserve each other. In the elevator, the tears finally flowed. By the time I got to my car, I was hard to breathe through crying. The drive home is a fog in my memories. I just recall contacting my mother from my flat, curled up on the bathroom floor and unable to form meaningful sentences due to my crying. Mother and father arrived within an hour, using their emergency key to get inside when I couldn't bring myself to open the door. Mother embraced me as I told them everything. Father walked the living room, his face turning hot with every detail. I'll kill him, he said quietly, handing over his heart. Edric. Your blood pressure, Mother admonished, while her own face was equally furious. The next few days were spent in a blur of pain. Mother assisted me in contacting vendors to cancel wedding arrangements, while Father handled the financial elements. I couldn't bear to look at Cassian when I returned the engagement ring to his apartment and left it with the doorman. I discovered Isolde had already moved her belongings in. The majority of her things were there, along with family photos arranged on shelves that used to hold mine. Cassian's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, saying that Isolde assisted him in cataloging my remaining items. The betrayal went further than I had thought. Through common friends, I discovered that they had been meeting covertly whenever I worked late or traveled for business. Isolde had intentionally sought him, making reasons to see him alone and sending texts and images when I wasn't around. The scandal immediately spread among our social circles. Some friends stood with me, while others supported Cassian, citing his business connections. Several people stated that they had spotted Cassian and Isolde flirting but had chosen not to get involved. Their cowardice hurt nearly as much as the treachery. During those dark months, my mother became my lifeline. She gave me food when I couldn't eat, listened to my crying rants, and stayed the night when the loneliness got unbearable. She regularly attempted to mediate between Isolde and myself, asking us both to family dinners that invariably resulted in awkward silence or nasty fights. During one such dinner, Isolde became enraged when I refused to pass her salt. You always have everything first, Seraphina, the grades, the task, the apartment. For once I received anything before you did. My fiancé wasn't a prize to be won, I said, my voice quivering. He was the man I loved and trusted. Mother put down her fork. Isolde Marie Thompson, apologize to your sister right now. For what? Being honest? Cassian selected me. He loves me now. I stood, a napkin put on my plate. I can't do it anymore, Mom. I am sorry. It was the last family supper I had with Isolde present. The stress of his daughter's conflict exacerbated father's heart problems, necessitating medication adjustments and further doctor appointments. Mother grew older in months, the lines around her eyes deepening as she desperately strove to keep her family together. I reached rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression and suggested medication. Work worsened as I struggled to focus, and I eventually lost a large client following a horrible presentation in which I burst into tears. My supervisor recommended a leave of absence, but I realized that staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only exacerbate my pain. When a marketing director position arose at our Chicago branch, I applied right away. The interview went fairly well, with my need for change possibly translating as eagerness. 2 weeks later, I got the offer. Mother helped me pack my flat, carefully wrapping photos and souvenirs in tissue paper while we went through my stuff to decide what to retain and what to donate. She brought up the matter that lingered between us. Will you ever contemplate forgiving Isolde? She inquired, closing a box with packing tape. I proceeded to fold sweaters without glancing up. I do not know, Mom. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it, she explained quietly. It's about freeing yourself. I'm liberating myself. I am moving to Chicago. Mother sat alongside me on the bed and took my hands in hers. Running away isn't the same as healing, sweetheart. Tears filled my eyes. I need space to even start healing. Can you get that? She nodded and pulled me into a close hug. Promise to call. Promise not to shut us out altogether. I promise. Saying farewell to my parents was more difficult than I thought. Father held me for longer than usual, his voice rough and emotional. Show them, kiddo. Create a life so good they'll choke on their regrets. My first few weeks in Chicago were lonely and filled with doubt. My small apartment felt sterile and foreign. I worked long hours to avoid going home to empty rooms, ate takeaway at my desk, and fell asleep exhausted every night. Then came the news, which pushed the knife deeper. Mother called on Sunday morning, her voice hesitant. Seraphina, I feel you should hear this from me rather than social media. Isolde and Cassian got married yesterday. Cassian's business contacts ensured coverage of the tiny civil ceremony, which was published in the society sections of Boston Magazine. The accompanying photo showed them beaming outside the courthouse, Isolde in a plain white dress with my former engagement ring proudly visible on her finger. That night was my low point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, browsed through old images of Cassian and me, and cried till my eyes swelled shut. I called in ill for work the next day, unable to face the world. But something changed during those lonely hours alone. As dawn light crept through my blinds, I decided that this was the last day I'd give them control over my happiness. I erased all Cassian images from my phone, blocked him and Isolde on social media, and took a lengthy shower, visualizing my pain washing away. At work, I refocused on my projects. My employer saw the shift and assigned me to larger clientele. I established a reputation for inventiveness and perseverance, winning respect in my new workplace. Cassian Reynolds, our HR director, was my first genuine Chicago buddy, and she introduced me to her book club. Through her, I met other ladies and gradually formed a social circle. Cassian routinely tried to set me up on dates, but I turned them all down since the prospect of romantic vulnerability terrified me. I was dispatched to a technology convention in San Francisco to represent our company. On the second evening, I went to a business dinner with possible clients and sat next to Leander Foster, a tech investor and entrepreneur who had recently moved from Seattle. Leander differed from Cassian in every way. Where Cassian was flamboyant and engaging, Leander was subtle and real. His gentle assurance and thought-provoking questions pulled people in without demanding attention. When he spoke about his work, his enthusiasm was palpable, but never boastful. He asked for my card after dinner, and I handed it to him with no expectations. To my surprise, he emailed the next morning, asking if I wanted to continue our discussion of digital marketing trends over coffee before the day's sessions. Over the next 3 months, Leander and I maintained professional contact. He sent clients to my agency, and I connected him to my Chicago business contacts. Madison noticed our regular work meals and raised her eyebrows. He likes you, Seraphina, and not just professionally. We're just colleagues, I said. Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you. Finally, Leander invited me to dinner at a place unrelated to work. I panicked and nearly canceled twice before forcing myself to go. I experienced a full-blown panic attack 20 minutes into our date, while we were discussing our favorite books. My hands shook, breathing got difficult, and tears filled my eyes. Instead of being embarrassed or upset, Leander walked to sit next to me and spoke gently until my breathing returned to normal. He drove me home with no pressure or inquiries. The following day, roses arrived at my office with a note. There is no pressure. No expectations. I hope you're feeling better. Leander. That evening, I called and told him everything about Cassian and Isolde. He listened without interruption, then recounted his own story of heartache from a previous marriage, which ended when his wife left him for his business partner, taking half of their joint firm in the divorce. Broken trust leaves scars, he remarked. Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't linear. Over the next few months, we began by laying the groundwork for our friendship. Leander never demanded more than I could give, respecting my boundaries while remaining fully present. For our fifth date, he made dinner at his apartment rather than taking me to a crowded restaurant, which could cause me worry. When terror flared up, he understood precisely how to help me get through it. For the first time since Cassian, I began to hope that trust could be restored. 1 year after arriving to Chicago, I scarcely recognized myself. My promotion to senior marketing director came with a corner office that overlooked the river. My circle of pals had grown beyond Madison to include a few close confidants. And most strangely, I had fallen deeply in love with Leander. Unlike Cassian's flamboyant wooing, Leander's love revealed itself in steady, methodical ways. He recalled minor details like my preference for oat milk in my coffee and the true crime podcasts I listened to. He honored my independence while providing unflinching support. Most significantly, he never compared myself to others or attempted to change me. I met Delphine, Leander's sister, during her visit from Portland. We quickly bonded, swapping phone numbers and forging our own connection outside of Leander. She told me stories of their upbringing in Seattle, drawing a picture of the youngster who grew into the guy I fell in love with. My contact with my parents remained from a distance. I called Mother on a weekly basis, carefully directing the conversation away from Isolde. Father periodically joined these talks, his gruff accent softening as he told me how happy he was of my new beginnings. I went twice that year, scheduling my visits around when I knew Isolde and Cassian would be gone. Mother offered occasional updates on them. Their marriage appeared idyllic on social media, with Isolde uploading photographs of luxurious vacations and charity galas. Mother stated that they had purchased a large property on Beacon Hill and were undergoing substantial renovations. Isolde occasionally inquires about you, Mother said during a phone chat. What are you telling her? I inquired, stirring pasta sauce on the stove. That you are doing well. That you are creating a new life. Has she ever expressed regret? Mother sighed. In her way. She becomes quiet when your name is mentioned. My therapy continued in Chicago, with my new therapist assisting me in processing the betrayal and establishing healthy relationship habits. I learned how to identify my triggers and communicate effectively. Cassian and Isolde-related dreams faded gradually. Leander surprised me with a weekend getaway to Michigan's wine country. We slept at a lovely bed and breakfast surrounded by vineyards, spent the afternoons wine tasting, and the evenings watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. For the first time in years, I felt entirely present and pleased, free of the weight of past betrayal. On our final evening at the Chicago Botanic area, Leander paused beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses while strolling through an early summer blooming area. Seraphina, he began, grabbing both of my hands in his. This past year, knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life. When he knelt and pulled a ring box from his pocket, pictures of Cassian's proposal flashed briefly, threatening to overwhelm the moment. But staring into Leander's eyes, all I saw was truth and affection. I'm not asking for an answer today, he continued, sensing my uncertainty. I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year, I'll be here. My eyes filled with tears, but not from fear or agony. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready now. The ring was nothing like the gaudy diamond Cassian had given me. It was a simple emerald with little diamonds on either side, delicate and subtle, much like our love. That night I called my folks to tell them the news. Mother cried happy tears. He sounds great, sweetie. When can we meet him? Soon, I assured. Very soon. We planned a small wedding for 30 guests at a historic Chicago venue. At Mother's request, I sent an invitation to Isolde, more as a gesture of healing than an expectation of presence. Her response arrived via email, brief and cold. Congratulations on the engagement. Unfortunately, Cassian and I have other engagements on that day. Best wishes for the future. Mother was disappointed, but not shocked. Give her time, Seraphina. This is advancement from where you were before. Our wedding day was intimate and joyful, with my parents, new friends, and Leander's family there. Father walked me down the aisle and whispered, "I haven't seen you this happy in years, kiddo." Leander's vows acknowledge our path. Seraphina, I promise to remember that love is both strong and fragile, requiring daily care and devotion. I promise to be worthy of your trust, knowing how valuable and difficult it is to earn. We established our lives together in Chicago, purchasing a brownstone and renovating it together. My career progressed, eventually leading to a vice president post. Leander's investment firm expanded, focused on female-led technology startups. During a dinner with business associates, I learned something that connected the past and present. A venture capitalist recalled working with Cassian years ago. Reynolds? Yeah, he and Foster were pretty competitive in the angel investing market approximately 7 years ago. Foster supported the right startup. Reynolds endorsed his competitor. Foster's pick was purchased for millions. Reynolds went bankrupt. Later that night, I asked Leander about the relationship. I was going to tell you eventually, he confessed. I recognized you when we met at the conference. Not the specifics of what occurred, but that you had been engaged to Reynolds. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted you to know me for who I am. Not as someone linked to your past. I was not angry. Somehow the cosmic symmetry felt appropriate. 2 years into our marriage, we started trying for a baby. Months passed without success, prompting fertility specialists and uncomfortable conversations. Throughout setbacks and medical procedures, Leander was my rock, comforting me through tears and telling me that family comes in various forms. Then came the tragic news of Mother's cancer diagnosis. Leander and I flew to Boston right away, meeting with physicians and guiding my parents through treatment options. Mother put up a brave face, but her cancer was severe and had spread. I took a leave from work to care for her, temporarily returning to my boyhood home. Leander flew in every weekend to support both me and my increasingly frail father. Mother and I had many meaningful chats about life, love and family in her last weeks. One evening, when I adjusted her pillows, she mentioned Isolde. I wish you girls could find peace with each other, she murmured, her voice weak but determined. Life is too short for such distance between sisters. I know, Mom, I said, holding back tears. Promise me you will try, Seraphina. Not for her, but for you. And maybe a little for your elderly mother. I promised, unsure if I could maintain it, but eager to give her peace. Mother died quietly 3 days later, with Leander, father and I by her bedside. I called Isolde right away, the first straight conversation we'd had in years. Mom's gone, I remarked when she responded. Her quick inhale was the sole sound for long seconds. I'll be there in an hour, she finally stated, her voice breaking. We arrived at our parents' house and exchanged brief, awkward hugs before turning our focus to father and funeral arrangements. The true test would be during the funeral, where years of pain and hatred would collide with new sadness and Mother's ultimate desire. The morning of Mother's burial was dark and drizzling, fitting the solemn occasion. I stood in front of the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my black dress and wondering how I'd get through the day. Leander stood behind me, gorgeous in his dark suit, and softly placed his hands on my shoulders. I'm right beside you today, he murmured, matching my gaze in the reflection. Whatever happens downstairs. Father sat at the kitchen table, looking blankly at his untouched coffee. The preceding week had hollowed him out, and his lofty form bent in despair. At 72, he appeared to have aged a decade since Mother's diagnosis. Ready, Dad? I asked softly, patting my shoulder. He nodded and rose slowly. Agnes always said funerals aren't for the dead, they're for the living. Never understood that until now. When we arrived, the funeral home was already full of extended relatives and friends. I stayed close to Father, greeting visitors with mechanical smiles and accepting condolences from people I scarcely recognized, including cousins from California, Mother's college roommate, and neighbors from my parents' 40-year home. You look just like Agnes at your age, my great-aunt Mireille murmured, caressing my cheek. She would be proud of the woman you've become. How have you been, dear? Said my mother's friend Romina. Agnes mentioned you moved away from Chicago, didn't you? Yes, almost 5 years now, I said, not mentioning that my sister's infidelity had spurred the transfer. As I walked father to his seat in the front row, with Leander on his opposite side, a murmur echoed across the audience. I turned to see Isolde and Cassian enter, their presence prompting heads to turn and rumors to spread. Isolde chose an exquisite black outfit that accentuated her tiny body, with diamond earrings catching the light. Cassian appeared uncomfortable in his nicely fitted suit, his arm around my sister's waist in a show of support. Her left hand was conspicuously placed on her pocketbook, making the huge diamond engagement ring and wedding band impossible to overlook. Father stiffened beside me. "Edric. Breathe," I said quietly, worried about his heart. They made their way ahead, pausing to chat with other attendees. I kept my gaze fixed on the enormous portrait of Mother displayed alongside her closed casket, her warm smile calming some of my nerves. They eventually reached the front. Isolde hugged Father, who returned it stiffly. Cassian shook his hand and received merely a short nod in return. "Seraphina," Isolde replied, turning to me with a look I couldn't read. "It's been a long time." "Yes," I said simply, not trusting myself to say more. Cassian nodded awkwardly. "Sorry for your loss." Leander had moved away to speak with the funeral director, leaving me alone with them. Isolde grasped the opportunity. "I need to speak with you privately," she explained, gesturing into a side room. Against my better judgment I followed her, hoping to avoid a scene at Mother's burial. The small space only had a couple chairs and a box of tissues, which were plainly meant for mourners who needed private moments. Isolde shut the door behind us. Up close, I noticed small creases around her eyes that her expensive cosmetics couldn't hide. "You look thin," she said, her gaze scrutinizing me. "Grief does that," I answered plainly. She fiddled with her ring and twisted it around her finger. "Cassian and I bought a summer house on Cape Cod last month. 8 bedrooms. Private beach access." I stayed silent, wondering why she felt compelled to reveal this knowledge. "We're considering starting a family soon," she added. "Cassian's company just acquired 2 startups, and we're renovating the 3rd floor for a nursery." "Congratulations," I murmured, my voice free of emotion. "Is there something specific you wanted to discuss about the funeral arrangements?" Her smile became harsh. "I just thought you might want to know how well we're doing. Poor you. Still alone at 38. I got the man, the money, and the mansion." The familiar pain flared quickly and then disappeared. Years ago those remarks would have destroyed me. Today, they appeared sad and forlorn. I grinned sincerely. "Have you met my husband yet?" Her expression faltered. "Husband?" "Leander," I called, opening the door to discover him waiting nearby. "Come meet my sister." Cassian appeared behind Leander as he entered the room, evidently studying our interactions. Cassian's cheeks became pale as the males made eye contact. "Foster," he murmured, his confidence fading. "Reynolds." Leander's tone remained professional and cold. "It's been what, 7 years? Not since Macintosh acquired Innotech instead of your client, CompuServe, right?" Cassian swallowed visibly. "You two are married?" "2 wonderful years now," I replied, putting my hand into Leander's. "Leander Foster," Isolde said softly. "As in Foster Investments?" "The same," Leander responded. "Seraphina and I met at a tech conference in San Francisco." Cassian struggled to regain his composure. "Foster, we should catch up sometime. I've been meaning to reach out about potential collaborations." "My schedule is quite full," Leander said politely but firmly. "But you can contact my office if you'd like." The funeral director appeared and informed us that the service was about to begin. As we returned to the main area, gossip circulated regarding Leander and Cassian's well-known business relationship. We had scarcely taken our seats when Father grasped his chest, his face contorted with pain. "Dad!" I shouted, as Leander instantly called for assistance. We relocated Father to a private room, and the funeral was temporarily postponed. A doctor among the attendees checked him and said that the cause was most likely stress rather than another heart attack. Isolde followed us with genuine anxiety on her face. "Is he okay? Should we call an ambulance?" Her voice trembled slightly. "The doctor says he's stable," I said, shocked by her truthfulness. "Just overwhelmed." For 20 minutes we sat there in awkward silence, linked only by our concern for our father. When he insisted on continuing with the service, we returned to the main chamber, with the brief crisis resulting in an unexpected truce. The funeral was both beautiful and tragic. I offered a eulogy that emphasized Mother's kindness, courage, and steadfast love for her family. When Isolde rose to speak after me, she hesitated after a few sentences, her eyes welling up with tears. Without thinking, I stepped to her side and rested my hand on her back. "It's okay," I said. "Take your time." She composed herself and finished her homage to our mother with anecdotes from our childhood that elicited tears and soft laughter from the audience. As we placed Mother to rest in the cemetery, a gentle rain poured. I noticed Cassian standing aside from the rest of the group, frequently checking his watch. Isolde stayed by Father's side, her former swagger replaced by true anguish. The celebration at my parents' house was packed with friends bringing casseroles and sharing memories. Cassian drank heavily, his uneasiness palpable as many business associates engaged Leander in intense discussion. I overheard pieces about Cassian's company failing with recent acquisitions and wondered whether Isolde's boasting was a cover for financial problems. Throughout the day, I kept the dignity Mother would have expected, focusing on supporting Father and honoring her memory, rather than lingering on previous scars. As visitors began to leave, I noticed Isolde observing me from across the room, her look opaque, but yet gentler than before. The day after the funeral, Leander had to return to Chicago for an important board meeting. "Are you sure you'll be okay if I leave?" he asked as he packed his overnight luggage. "I can reschedule." "Dad needs help sorting through Mom's things," I explained. "I should stay for a few more days." "I will be fine." After dropping off Leander at the airport, I returned to my parents' property to find Father sitting in Mother's garden with a photo album open on his lap. "She labeled everything," he explained, displaying me Mother's clean handwriting beneath each photo. Said, "Someday we'd appreciate knowing who was who." That afternoon I started the unpleasant chore of sorting through Mother's closet. Each dress evoked memories. The blue one from my college graduation, the flowery print she wore to Sunday brunches, and the exquisite gray she chose for my engagement celebration. I found myself talking to her while I worked, telling her about my life in Chicago, my job, and my happiness with Leander. In her nightstand drawer, I noticed a soft leather-bound journal. Mother has kept a journal inside for the past 10 years. Many people addressed her daughters, her desire for our reunification, and her anguish about the schism between us. The last entry, dated only 2 weeks before her death, read, "My greatest regret is leaving with my daughters still alienated. Agnes was always a problem solver, but I couldn't solve it. I hope they find their way back to each other somehow." I was wiping away tears when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I noticed Isolde standing alone on the porch. There is no evidence of Cassian's automobile in the driveway. Father had gone to his brother's house for dinner, leaving me alone with my sister. I opened the door, not sure what to expect. "Hi," she said simply. "Can I come inside?" I made coffee in the kitchen as Isolde sat at the table, mute. She appeared different without Cassian alongside her, smaller and less falsely composed. "Where is Cassian?" I eventually asked, placing a mug in front of her. "At home. He has no idea I am here." She cupped her hands around the mug but did not sip. I told him I needed space after the funeral. The stillness stretched between us, years of unspoken words creating a tangible barrier. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she finally said. "What I said in that funeral homeroom. It was cruel and totally inappropriate." I nodded, acknowledging her apologies but not instantly accepting it. "I saw Mom's journal," she added. "My dad showed it to me last night. Her final request was for us to reconcile." "I found it too," I said. "But reconciliation necessitates more than mere proximity, Isolde. It requires honesty." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "Do you want honesty?" "This is honesty. Seraphina, I've been miserable. I've been here almost from the beginning." The dam cracked, and words poured forth between sobs. Cassian had changed quickly after their wedding, becoming controlling and critical. His company had been failing for years, and each new acquisition was an attempt to save a sinking ship. The mansions, automobiles, and holidays were all financed with rising debt. Their marriage was a carefully crafted front for business connections and social stature. "He keeps track of how much I spend. Check my phone." She admits that she questions every movement I make. "The Cassian you know does not exist anymore. Perhaps he never did." "Why stay?" I asked. "Shame," she replied promptly. "How could I admit to you what I had done? Destroyed our family over something that turned out to be a mirage. Then there's the prenup. If I go, I won't get anything." I moved Mother's journal across the table. "Read the rest of her entries." As Isolde read, new tears flowed. She finally looked up, her face raw with passion. She knew. She saw through everything. Mom always did. I agreed. I've hated myself for years, Isolde confessed. Every time Mom addressed you, or proudly recounted your accomplishments, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I'm going to leave him, Seraphina. I have been covertly consulting a lawyer. My emotions were complicated. Vindication combined with unexpected tenderness. The sister who had caused me so much pain was facing consequences that I would not wish on anyone. I don't expect forgiveness, she added. I do not deserve it. But I need you to understand the reality before I blow up my life again. We spent the next few hours together sorting through Mother's stuff, exchanging both painful and happy memories. Isolde recalls Mother teaching us how to prepare cookies and how she never combined the two batches since I favored chocolate chips and Isolde preferred sugar cookies. Do you remember how she used to leave notes in our lunchboxes? Isolde inquired, smiling through tears. Different messages every day. I nodded. She never repeated one. We weren't suddenly healed. The wounds were too deep for fast closure, but as twilight fell, something changed between us. Mother's love builds a shaky bridge over years of pain. What are you going to do? I inquired as Isolde prepared to depart. File for divorce when my lawyer says the time is right. Rent a modest apartment. Start anew. She halted at the door. How about you? Will you return to Chicago? Yes. My life is now with Leander. You seem happy, she replied, rather than asking a question. I am. Truly happy. I'm happy. One of us should be. We shared a quick, awkward hug before she went. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But that was a start. Back in Chicago, I settled into life with Leander, our brownstone, and a fulfilling career. I realized that I was pregnant. After years of trying, the delight was tempered by the grief that Mother would not be able to see her grandchild, yet I sensed her presence in quiet moments. Isolde and I maintained cautious communication via phone calls. She had filed for divorce and relocated to a modest apartment, working at a tiny marketing agency. The gossip and censure she encountered in Boston's social circles were difficult, but she appeared determined to rebuild authentically. The route that brought me here was not one I would have chosen. Losing Cassian looked to be the end of my world, but it was actually the start of a far better one. With Leander, I discovered not just love, but also partnership, respect, and unfailing support. His success never eclipsed mine, but rather complemented it, as we both grew stronger together. Mother had been correct in stating that forgiveness is for ourselves rather than others. The weight of wrath and bitterness had gradually lifted, allowing me to see my past clearly and my future with optimism. Although the wounds lingered, they no longer defined me. As I sat in our nursery, Leander painting the walls a soft green, I reflected about the teachings I would one day teach our kid about how grief may lead to discovery. How endings make way for new beginnings. And how the most difficult times often lead us to our truest path. My life had become richer and more authentic than I could have imagined, not because of the betrayal, but because it compelled me to rebuild with greater insight and intent. Have you ever suffered a devastating loss that ultimately led to something better? I would love to hear your stories in the comment section below. And if this trip spoke to you, please subscribe and share with someone who may need to hear that sorrow is not the end of the narrative. Well, that was a disaster, but believe it or not, this next one might be even worse. I funded my brother's college for 4 years, but he mocked me to my face. So I shut down every account, and watched him panic. I am 31 years old and have been my family's unseen safety net, for the most of the past 10 years. Someone had to step up after my dad fell into a debt hole, and missed mortgage payments after losing his job during the 2008 crisis. At 22, I was that someone. I was sending money home while most of my pals were trekking throughout Europe or squandering their paychecks on expensive cocktails and concerts. It was just groceries at the start. The mortgage followed. Next came the tuition for my younger brother Jake, the cheerleading fees for my sister Rosalind, and my mother's monthly allowance, as she liked to refer to it, even though it had nothing to do with the month. Short this week, can you help? She would text, and I would arrange for it. Nobody inquired as to whether I had enough for myself. Nobody expressed gratitude. Instead, I received insulting comments. My mother detested the fact that I no longer attend church. My dad didn't consider my work in marketing to be a legitimate career. Jake made fun of the size of my place. I didn't drive 4 hours every weekend to visit, so Rosalind dubbed me emotionally unavailable, even though I was paying for the house they wanted me to return home to. But last Friday was the tipping point. It was meant to be an ordinary family phone call. I was discussing Rosalind's fall tuition, and the fact that my landlord had increased my rent once more on Zoom. I gently hinted that I might have to reduce the amount of help. "You know what? We don't want to see your face anymore." Mom leaned in at that point and hung up. Uncertain of what had just transpired, I gazed at my computer. My text message to her bounced. Blocked. I then looked at my email. Silence on the radio. Dad didn't respond. Neither Rosalind nor Jake responded. As if I were an alien who had let them down, they had closed ranks. I ought to have sobbed or screamed. I felt cold instead. Unambiguous. I went to work after writing one final message which read, "You won't see my money either." Not at work, but at cutting off all of the financial support I had established for them. When you're the one pulling the strings, it's odd how easily things can fall apart. "You won't see my money either," I texted that morning, and then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee. I wasn't rushing, for once. No rushing around with bank transfers. No figuring out in my head how much money I would have left over for groceries once everyone else had received their share. Just silence, the worthy kind of silence. The mortgage comes first. The payments came from me, even though my name wasn't on the deed. Like clockwork, a recurrent transfer was established years ago. 2 clicks were used to cancel. I verified it over the phone with the bank. I will no longer be sending money to their house from my account. Then there was Mom's joint account, which she utilized like a vending machine. I would arrange it up to allow her some independence and self-respect. She was able to treat me like an ATM more easily as a result. After draining the account, I closed it entirely. Upon being prompted to provide the reason by the bank agent, I hesitated for a moment before typing. Abuse of trust. The tuition payments followed. My email was still connected to Jake's college site. I canceled the saved payment method after logging in. It felt nice, so I even placed a note under billing contacts that read, "No longer financially responsible. The utilities are gone. Account for grocery delivery. Canceled." Even so, there was a moment of awkward silence when I called the landlord of their rental home and stated, "Hey, I won't be covering the rent anymore. You'll want to speak directly with the tenants from now on." His next words were, "Understood." Suddenly, I was at liberty. Not a word. No fireworks. Just a calm, strategic withdrawal. It was odd how simple it was to remove myself from their financial lives. It was like erasing files you didn't realize you were keeping. I wasn't worried about how to do too much for the first time in years. All I was doing was breathing. That stillness didn't last long, but I didn't anticipate a response at first. That night was the beginning. My phone buzzed as I was finishing dinner. Something easy. Something for me. Unknown figure. I let the voicemail go. Then one more. Then 2 consecutive texts. Jake's tuition was unsuccessful. Mom is going crazy. Give her a call. No names. Don't say hello, only demands. As if nothing had altered. The third message was from a completely different number. As soon as I opened it, I knew the tone. Teresa, my aunt, was there. She must have been lured in by Mom. "Whatever's going on, your mom says you're being irrational. Can we talk?" I didn't answer. The calls increased the following morning. A voicemail was left from a blocked number. Rosalind was the one. She spoke in a tremulous, quieter tone than normal. "I'm not mad, I swear. I can't get a hold of anyone. My school emailed saying I have a balance or they'll drop my classes. Can you please just talk to Mom? She's not herself right now." She was in tears. Just tears. No guilt tripping, no shouting. And it broke something inside of me, I'll admit. I didn't call back though. I cared too much for too long. Not because I didn't care. Then, using a friend's number, Mom arrived. First, a text. "Please, this has gone too far. Let's talk, like a family." She called a minute later. I let the voicemail go. And based on what I heard, she wasn't exactly upset. She spoke cautiously, almost beseechingly, but with the same pride. "You've made your point, we get it. But this isn't how families act. We're not perfect, but we've always had each other. I don't know what you want from me. Do you want me to beg?" And no apology, still. She didn't acknowledge what she said to me with a single word. They didn't even acknowledge that they had gone too far. A woman accustomed to having authority realized that the floor had abruptly disappeared. Their son was still alive. Their lifeline was gone. After a few days, you would think it would be simpler to ignore them, but it wasn't. It became more bizarre. The messages changed over time. I was initially terrified, then guilt, then the history was rewritten. As if I hadn't paid for 4 years of his college tuition like it was a monthly Netflix subscription. Jake launched a wall of text messages about how I'd always made everything about money and how he never asked for help anyhow. With a dramatic, "I wish things didn't have to be like this," Rosalind responded as though I had abruptly vanished in the middle of the night. And then Mom's voice memo. I gave it a try. That was sufficient. "You think we used you? That's not fair. We relied on you because we thought you wanted to help. You never said no. You always showed up. You were the strong one." She was correct, in the manner I'd always appeared, so that bit really got to me. Strength, however, is limited. It has become old. It deteriorates. Additionally, it's not family when people only ever support you after the checks stop coming in. A transaction, that is. I thus totally ignored them. The new numbers were blocked. All significant accounts have been moved to private. With one silent tap, I exited the family group chat. About it, I didn't post. I refrained from venting. I didn't strike back. I simply disappeared from their ledger. It's funny how quickly someone loses visibility when their name doesn't have a $sign next to it. The calls decreased at the end of the week. Silence crept in between the texts. They left a hole that didn't feel like a loss. It had the feel of vastness. Space to breathe. Space to reflect. There is space to envision a life free from obligations. I recognized then that I wasn't done giving them money. I had finished introducing myself. I slept in the morning after blocking the final number. The "no one needs anything from me" kind of way, not the indulgent, lazy kind. No phone that vibrates. No bank notifications. By Friday there was no mental inventory of who required what. Only the sound of my own breathing and the sun on my face. I brewed actual coffee. Not the instant crap I had been consuming to help pay my home electricity bill. As I sat at my kitchen table, I came to an almost ridiculous realization. I now own this money. I then turned on my laptop. I looked at my balance and opened my budgeting app, which I used to regard like a war report. I then began enumerating everything I had consistently said someday to. I'm going to travel someday. I'll start my own company someday. I'll invest in myself someday. Abruptly, someday it became today. I started by booking a flight to Lisbon, no stops over, a seat by the window. I kept it a secret. I didn't have to. I didn't need anyone's approval to disappoint them. No longer. I then scheduled a meeting with a small business advisor. For years I'd harbored a dream of opening a creative studio that specialized in branding for independent artists. I had aided countless others in creating their futures. Perhaps it was time for me to construct my own. I had accomplished more for my future by noon than I had in the previous 5 years. No phone calls. Don't text. Not guilty. Only freedom. And it had the same flavor as that initial coffee sip. However, I didn't necessarily block the memories just because I blocked the numbers. Like background noise you didn't notice until the silence made it clear, they infiltrated stealthily. Mom used to text me every Sunday at 9 a.m., and I would suddenly remember that while I was strolling down the street. Acerbic. Did the money come through yet? No salutation, no, "How are you?" Just a reminder of my duties. Or, out of habit, I would hesitate when I was at the grocery store, reaching for something as basic as good cheese, because for years, every purchase I made was accompanied by guilt. When Dad saw a new jacket I had purchased on clearance, he once remarked, "It must be nice." Guess the rest of us just have to struggle. Helping was never the goal, it had to do with control. The kind of subtle, silent, sneaky control that creeps into your bones and makes you mistake it for love. It was louder than I had anticipated during that first week of silence, because I had to discover who I was for the first time without their need to define me. To be honest, I had no idea. Not quite yet. However, I was beginning to learn. I went to a museum alone, bought a new sketchbook, started drawing again. Little things, small pieces of me I hadn't touched in years because I was too busy stitching together the pieces of their lives. I occasionally still looked at my phone, half expecting to see another number that might have slipped through the cracks. But they didn't. Eventually they stopped trying. Or maybe they finally understood that I meant it this time. That I was done. There's a strange kind of grief that comes when you stop being who everyone expects you to be. Not because you miss them, but because you start realizing how much of yourself you never really knew. The truth was, I had been a ghost in my own life for nearly a decade. I had moved cities, not because I wanted to explore, but because it made it easier to send money without questions. I worked late nights, not for ambition, but to afford my brother's textbooks. I stayed single, not because I wanted to, but because anytime I tried to build something with someone, I felt like a fraud. How could I invite someone into my life when that life wasn't mine to begin with? I was too busy funding other people's dreams. That week after cutting them off, I started piecing things together. Not just finances but fragments of who I used to be. I dug through an old drawer and found a dusty journal from years ago. Pages full of plans I'd forgotten I ever wrote. One entry read, "I want to open a space where people come to create. I want it to be beautiful, warm, a little messy, and a lot honest." I sat there rereading that line a dozen times. It was written in a coffee shop after a shift I barely survived, back when I still believed I'd have a life of my own someday. That dream of opening a creative studio was still there, just buried under years of maybe laters, and not until Jake graduates, and Mom needs new tires. But now, no more excuses. No more siphoning my energy into a hole that never said thank you. I emailed a realtor about commercial spaces in my area. I signed up for a small business course. I reached out to people I'd lost touch with. Not family, but the friends I pushed aside because they didn't understand what I was dealing with. And I told the truth. I'm finally doing something for me. The response was overwhelming. One friend said, "It's about time." Another replied, "I thought I lost you." They hadn't. I'd just been buried. But now I was starting to unearth something I thought was gone for good. Hope. There were still tough moments. Nights where I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Moments where I missed the idea of family more than the people themselves. But those moments didn't define me anymore. What defined me was the sound of silence, not filled with guilt. The sight of my bank balance slowly rising. The feeling of drawing in that sketchbook, page after page, without apology. I was no longer the backup plan for people who never made space for mine. I have my own plan now. The silence lasted about 2 weeks. Then they tried again. But not directly this time. It was softer, more calculated. The kind of manipulation that's dressed up in concern and stitched together with nostalgia. A message came through Instagram. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, just checking in. Your mom says you haven't been around much. She's worried. Is everything okay?" I looked at it for a while. The phrase was so careful. Haven't been around, not cut them off. Not after everything they said. It seemed as if the last decade of sacrifices had been wiped, rebuilt with a story that made them the abandoned ones. I didn't respond. 2 days later my dad emailed me. An actual email, something he never does. It was short. "Whatever issues you have with your mother, we can work it out. You've made your point. Don't let your pride cost you your family." I sat there reading it over and over and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just the boring weight of familiarity. That was the language of our family. Pride. Duty. Point made. As if I'd thrown a tantrum instead of walking away from years of exploitation. But then came the ultimate crack. Rosalind. Her voicemail was left. No showmanship this time. Only her voice, tired and subdued. "I know you think we used you. Maybe we did. I don't know. I'm not mad. I'm just tired. I didn't ask for this. None of us did." But she was mistaken there. They expected, even if they didn't ask directly. I was expected to arrive, pay, be modest, and remain silent. They were at a loss for what to do when I didn't. Because my obedience had been their solace for years. Their safety net. My sacrifice. They weren't mourning anyone now that it was gone. They were mourning a breadwinner. I believe they secretly understood they had lost me, because I had finally realized the truth. Not because they were harsh or angry. I was unable to avoid seeing it. I paid the deposit on a studio space the same week. It had light, despite its flaws. Old floorboards, creaking windows, exposed pipes. In the afternoons, warm, golden light spilled into the back. With a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years, I signed the lease. I owned this. Not transient, not borrowed, and not dependent on keeping others afloat. The walls were painted by me. White with a single accent of rich green that gave the space a vibrant atmosphere. I arranged a large table with chairs that didn't match. Some art books were donated by a friend. I was assisted by another in hanging shelves. I kept it a secret from everyone. I didn't give a speech or post a grand opening. I simply sat down at my desk, opened the door, and let out a breath. I can still hear their voices in my thoughts on some days. Why don't you come home more? Your sister needs help with books. You know mom's not good with money. It's not a real career, but at least it pays. Now, however, they echo. Far away. Helpless. Bending is no longer my style. The wallet in the room isn't me. I'm not the handy phantom people summon when the tuition is due, and the refrigerator is empty. I am who I am. And that's finally enough for the first time in my life. That year, spring arrived early. The kind of balmy breeze that fools you into believing the world is kinder than it actually is, and causes the trees to bloom too soon. I saw it as I was on my way back from my studio. My studio. A number you know. I didn't identify it, therefore I hadn't blocked it. For too long my hand lingered over the screen. Curiosity always prevails. I replied. Hey, Rosalind murmured in a faint, gentle voice. They want to have dinner. Just talk. No strings. I told them I'd ask you. A long pause ensued. She waited as if she had grown accustomed to being disregarded. Then she said, I think they miss you. I let the silence linger. Then I asked one important question. Did they apologize? She let out a sigh. They said they want to move on. I nearly grinned. It was there. Sorry, just jump right to the reunion scene and skip the bit when they confess what they did. I'm not coming, I declared. Why not? She asked in a broken voice that was not furious but rather something else. Perhaps confused. I worried that I had always meant it. Because it isn't healing to go on without taking responsibility. Denial is the cause. And that story no longer includes me. Another extended gap ensued. Then she said, I guess I'll see you around then. I didn't respond. We were both aware that she wouldn't. Almost painfully, the next weeks were calm once more. Burner texts are over. No voicemails filled with guilt. No, we must discuss emails. They seem to have finally come to terms with my leaving. Not to cover the expenses. Not to take on their embarrassment. Not to act as though it had all been completed, but rather as if it had just happened. Officially, I was no longer part of their tale. It was also serene. Peaceful, but not easy. And in that silence, I was able to accomplish things I had never permitted myself to do before. I used my studio to host a workshop, a branding course for creatives in the area. There were 5 people present. After their first client won, one of them sent me a thank you card while crying. It was pinned on the wall by me. I had dinner with a girl I had not spoken to in years. I didn't think I deserved someone who didn't need me, not because I didn't like her. She asked questions about my artwork as if she genuinely cared about the answers, and she laughed at my crude jokes. I was honest with her. Instead of transferring funds to another person's account, I began saving. I made another travel reservation. Just to explore, not to flee. To survive. Occasionally I would glance at my phone and think, this is how peace feels. Not a lack. Liberty. In retrospect, I have no regrets. I didn't give those years because they showed me how far I would go for love. And not when I stopped, because that's when I realized how far I was prepared to go for myself. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Unbelievable, right? Well, the drama doesn't stop there. Here's another one for you. Mom called my baby ugly at her birthday party, so I cut ties and erased her from every photo. Now she's crying on Facebook, playing the victim. My daughter Sarah's first birthday was meant to be soft and forgettable in all the best ways, like a warm breeze in June, or the fragrance of cake that lingers on your fingers long after the last mouthful has been eaten. It was a small gathering of family and neighbors in the backyard, with mismatched folding chairs pushed into the lawn, paper plates crumbling under store-bought cupcakes, and kids shrieking aimlessly. The kind of day you wouldn't write a sonnet about, but you would post a few grainy photos online with a message like, "Can't believe she's won already," and then move on. I had no intention of remembering it permanently, at least not in the sense that I do now. Sarah was dressed in a pale yellow romper with a stitched bumblebee on the breast, and one shoe went missing within the first 20 minutes. My husband Rick stood beside me, awkwardly holding her as we sang "Happy Birthday," too slowly, too loudly. My sister Donna cracked a joke about our tone-deaf family, and everyone laughed a little too loudly since that's what we do. We overcompensated. The air smelt of plastic forks, citronella candles, and charred hamburgers. It should have been a great day. Then my mother arrived late, as usual, with a gift too enormous for the occasion, wrapped in shiny gold paper, as if we were celebrating a royal coronation, rather than a baby smearing icing into her own eye socket. Eleanor never knew how to read a room. All she knew was how to walk in and adjust the temperature. She kissed Sarah's head without looking at her, then turned to face me, smiling with her lips but not her eyes. "You look tired," she murmured, just loud enough for Donna to notice. "Still carrying that baby weight, huh?" I laughed quickly and instinctively, because I'd spent my entire life trying not to react when she cut. Rick tried to divert her attention by asking if she wanted a burger or something to drink, but she waved him away like a fly. She seemed overly focused on surveying the party, as if she were inspecting a battlefield. The incident occurred as we were attempting to convince Sarah to blow out her single candle. Everyone was crowded around the small table, phones out, and voices mingling with feigned eagerness. I leaned in close, smiling, and braced Sarah's small fingers as she reached for the flame. Then my mother leaned down, her lips almost next to my ear, and said, "She's going to grow up ugly, like you." I did not turn to look at her. I did not even blink. I literally froze there, mid-smile, one hand on my daughter's small wrist, the other gripping my phone as if it were about to burst. The candle flickered. Sarah produced a sneeze-like sound, and the flame went out. Everyone applauded. The moment has passed. But I did not. Later that night, after Sarah had fallen asleep and the last of the icing had been scraped from the terrace, I sat on the couch, browsing through images as if looking for something specific. I didn't know what. Not at first. Then I found it. It was fuzzy and overexposed. My face was slightly tilted, my mouth in that strange half-smile you get when you're going to laugh, but something feels off. My mother was in the corner of the shot, just visible behind my shoulder. Her face was near to mine, lips curved like a hook, and eyes focused. She resembled a different woman. Nobody else in the shot seems to notice her. They were all concentrating on Sarah. But I saw it. I saw her. I sat there staring at the photo for too long. Rick entered from the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "Looking through the shots?" he inquired. "Yeah," I answered without moving. "That one's cute," he added, referring to a photo of Sarah with frosting on her hair. But I did not show him the second one. I did not say anything. I merely quietly saved it in a folder labeled "Evidence," all uppercase. The issue about mothers like mine is that they make you wonder whether your memories are your own or hers. She had a way of twisting things, so I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or simply underhealing. But this time, I had proof. I had a snapshot of the exact moment my brain said enough. That was the first picture I removed her from. I opened my editing app, the same one youngsters use to smooth their skin and whiten their teeth, and I started tiny. I cropped her out. I removed her shadow. Then I went on to group photography, specifically backyard images. The one where she is seated near the grill. The one where she's holding Sarah but not truly holding her. Arms stiff as if the infant was made of knives. Delete. Crop. Overcoat with paint. It became addictive, like cleansing a wound you were unaware was still bleeding. The following day, I printed 10 of my best photos and displayed them in Sarah's room. Every single one of them, beautiful, bright, cheerful, and devoid of Eleanor. Donna messaged me a few days later. "Hey, where's the picture of Mom holding Sarah? The one from the cake didn't come out? I replied, which was technically correct. That night, I had a dream about a family portrait, but whenever I tried to smile, my mother would lean in and mutter something, causing my face to crumble like wet paper. I awoke to a scorching determination in my chest. I was not going to let Sarah grow up hearing the same poison I had. I was not going to wait for the next party, photo, or whispered slur masquerading as truth. I wasn't going to let my mother write herself into my daughter's story the way she did mine, with a harsh tongue and a crooked smile. And if she didn't want to love Sarah properly, she would not love her at all. I took out my phone and began looking through every album, memory, and location my mother had ever touched in digital form. And I started erasing her, image by picture, word by word, memory by memory, because revenge doesn't always have to be overt. Sometimes it is just a quiet delete. That's just where I started. There is a distinction between forgetting someone and determining they do not deserve to be remembered. And I didn't truly comprehend it until I was standing in my laundry room, folding a pair of baby socks that didn't even match, and remembered how my mother used to call me thick around the middle when I was 12. Not with malice, at least not in the way most people could see, but with a tiny tilt of her voice, as if she was diagnosing a problem that she believed would only worsen. And she was not wrong. It did. Not my weight, but how I carried myself. By the age of 16, she had upgraded the insult. Plain, she'd reply. Sometimes in passing, sometimes in the middle of a conversation, as if she was doing me a favor by saying it out loud before anybody else could. I recall brushing my hair the night before prom, holding the curling iron too long on one strand till it sizzled, and hearing her through the cracked door exclaim, "She's just forgettable. Maybe it's the eyes." As if I weren't right there. As if I weren't attempting to obliterate myself quicker than she could. At 22, I told her I wanted to relocate across the nation, start anew, and possibly go to graduate school. She did not flinch. She simply muttered, "You were probably a mistake anyway," as if she were reading it from a grocery list. I did not cry. I just nodded. Because what else can you do when someone tells you the truth like that? You either let it soak into your bones or spit it out before it sticks. I let it settle. For years. But now, I have Sarah. And something about becoming a mother makes you want to either shield your child from the world or expose her to it, piece by agonizing piece. I picked protection since I was aware of how sharp the initial cut could be. And I'd rather she was naive than quietly bleeding before she learned to speak. So I dug deeper than photos. I dug up the old flash drives, cloud backups, and printed albums buried in drawers I hadn't touched in years. Eleanor, my mother, was posing next to me at my wedding with a tight-lipped smirk, as if she were watching a slow-motion calamity. I opened the image in an editor and meticulously painted her out. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to remove decades of her standing too near to me, clutching me as if she were allergic to warmth. Gone. I glanced at the shot thereafter, the space she had occupied now filled with light and air. It seemed better without her. Then I moved on. To the Christmas of 3 years ago. She informed me that if I didn't cut back on the salt, Sarah would most likely be born cross-eyed. She said it with a giggle, fork halfway in her mouth. I nodded, too tired to fight. She was no longer in the background of the photograph, replaced by the glow of the tree and Donna's toddler throwing a plastic ornament at the cat. I erased her from a total of 24 images, which is unusual given that we only had 13 visitors at the party. But she managed to insert herself into every situation, as if she was certain that no moment went by without her involvement. Donna was the first to notice. She texted me 2 days after I published the revised album online. "Where's Mom in these pics? Did she leave early?" I composed and deleted my response 3 times before I got to, "She must have stepped out when those were taken." Technically, this is not a lie, spiritually perhaps. Rick took notice next. He didn't say anything right immediately, but gave me the slow, deliberate look he saves for when he's deciding whether to hug me or propose therapy. Finally, during supper, he asked, "Are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" I gazed at Sarah, cheeks full of mashed peas, face plastered with love and innocence, and said, "I'm already halfway there." What I did not mention was this. If I had a time machine, I would not go back and stop myself from doing this. I go back even further and eliminate Eleanor from every birthday, every dance recital, and every time I stood in front of a mirror and despised what I saw, because she had given me the means to express that hatred. Late that night, I was going through my phone in the dark when I noticed the message notification flash up. One line, no greetings. Why am I blocked from your daughter's baby album? I stared at it for so long that the screen darkened. I did not respond. I did not need to. She understood why. She simply didn't want to say it. And to be honest, part of me was waiting to see whether she'd send another message, call, or even show up again as if nothing had happened. Pretending that I was the dramatic one. Like I'd always misunderstood her. Like her comments were never daggers, but rather innocent small remarks. But she did not follow up. She did not push. Because she must have known, deep down in her cruel little chest, that I wasn't flinching this time. This time I was chopping. And this time, she was not returning. There is a type of vengeance that does not include broken glass or shouted voices, and does not result in bruises, shredded garments, or tire marks in a driveway. It comes on slowly, like poison in a cup of tea, something that tastes nearly good before making you sick. And when done correctly, no one can track it back to you. That's how I began dealing with my mother, as if she were a silent infection that I was finally addressing after years of pretending I wasn't sick. Yes, it started with the photographs. But it did not end there. Removing her face from images was simply the beginning. Underneath that surface, the rot permeated everything she touched. And I wasn't finished pulling it out yet. First, I excluded her from the family calendar, which Rick and I used to keep track of birthdays, appointments, preschool visits, medical checkups, and holidays. I removed her email address from the invitation list. She deleted all of the events she had previously been invited to. She wiped away the repeated reminders of her presence. Then I altered the location of Sarah's daycare picnic, and only shared the new information to people I trusted not to share it. When Donna inquired as to why the address had changed, I explained that they were experiencing plumbing troubles. That was enough to please her. Nobody doubts logistics when it comes to infants. Everyone assumes that the mess belongs to someone else. Rick was watching me out of the corner of his eye, much like a man watches a lady who has started carrying a knife. I'm not sure whether she's defending herself or preparing something worse. One night, while Sarah was sleeping and I was lying on the couch retouching another old shot, he asked me, "Are you going to tell her?" I did not look up from my screen. Tell who what? He gave me the worn look I'd come to expect. The one that screamed, "Don't act dumb, Jenna. Not with me." So I closed my laptop and looked into his eyes. "Are you going to tell your mother why you're cutting her out of everything?" I did not respond right away. Because there was too much to say, and none of it came across the way I needed it to. So I simply shook my head. "She doesn't deserve closure," I finally stated. "She never gave me any." And that was the most honest sentence I had spoken aloud in months. I didn't receive any closure when she told me I was prettier before my teeth came in. I was 10 years old, standing in our hallway in a new pink dress, beaming because I finally had sleeves that weren't stretched out hand-me-downs. She glanced at me and said, "You used to be cute before those teeth." She treated me as if I were some wrecked adult she no longer wanted. I didn't find closure when she mocked me for crying at my own graduation, or told me that no man would ever marry someone so emotional. And I didn't receive any closure when she claimed Sarah would grow up to be ugly like me. So she wasn't receiving courteous phone calls. She wasn't receiving a formal announcement. She would figure it out in the same way the rest of the world does, via absence. Absence, however, carries its own weight. It fills the room like smoke. Slow and undetectable at first, then stifling when you realize you've been waiting too long to move. She must have felt it too, because less than a week after I kicked her out of the picnic, she showed up on my doorstep. It was late Thursday afternoon, the light was softening, and the fragrance of sun-warmed mulch rose from the flower beds I hadn't touched since spring. Sarah was playing with a bucket of toy blocks on the floor, humming to herself in that delightful nonsense language that toddlers use before words make sense. Then the doorbell rang. I recognized who it was before I opened it. Eleanor stood there clutching a gift bag that appeared to have come from an extravagant downtown boutique, complete with glittering handles and ribbons instead of wrapping paper. She wore her frozen half-smile, which she employed when she wanted to appear warm, but didn't have the energy for. And I will say this for her. She did not begin with a question, an apology, or even a joke. She simply said, "Thought I'd drop by." For Lily. I remained in the doorway and did not move aside. I wasn't going to make it simple. Inside, Sarah stopped humming. She looked up, then toward the door, then back down, as if something in her little head wasn't quite right. Eventually I let Eleanor in, more out of morbid curiosity than grace. She tried to approach Sarah carefully, crouched next to her, and holding out the bag like a wicked fairy godmother dispensing curses disguised as candy. But Sarah didn't approach her. She did not even smile. She glanced at Eleanor for a few long seconds before returning to her blocks and picking up the green one. As if the moment had passed. I saw my mother's face flicker in perplexity, the corners of her lips sagging just slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I recognized every crease in her face, every breach in her armor. She waited for Sarah to get closer, for that innate, infantile need to reach out to a familiar adult. But it never arrived. In that instant, something sharp and decisive clicked into place. Because even babies recognize when love is not genuine. I took the gift bag from her hands without saying anything, placed it on the table without peeking inside, and said the only thing that needed to be spoken. "I think it's time you left." She did not argue. She did not yell. She only nodded once and turned around, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she walked out of the house as if she had somewhere more important to do. However, she didn't. Not anymore. Because I wasn't going to burn down the house with her inside. I was only making sure she never got a key again. I always assumed that if anyone was going to support me, really step up and say, "Yeah, she did that. I saw it too. She said those things." It would be my sister. Donna was the one who experienced it beside me. Grew up in the same tight house, with the same oppressive restrictions and chilly silences that lasted longer than they should have. She was present when our mother called me dramatic for crying during Dad's burial, and then brought her into the kitchen to whisper, "Thank God it wasn't you, sweetheart. I couldn't handle that." She was there when Eleanor would criticize my appearance before turning to Donna, with a smile so warm you'd swear it came from someone else's mouth. We used to laugh about it in our 20s, laying on the floor of my flat with cheap wine and takeaway, calling her Jackal and Mom, when we were courageous enough to do so. But we never dug deeper. We never asked why Donna received the gold while I got the gravel. So when she eventually texted, "Can we talk?" I knew what was coming. The guilt. The perplexity. "Perhaps you're taking things a little too far." Even though I had prepared for it, I still felt a knot in my gut. The same one I used to get when I was a kid, and Eleanor called my name from another room, with that tone that made you question if you'd done anything wrong, even though you hadn't. Donna arrived with coffee in her hand and a tense expression on her face, as if she was trying not to frown, but couldn't quite achieve it. She didn't sit down straight away, instead hovering around the kitchen counter, as if she wasn't sure she wanted to remain long. I waited for her to speak first since I understood how things worked. She needed to feel in charge of the story. "You've been editing her out of everything," she finally said, her words cautious and slow, as if she hoped if she softened them enough, I wouldn't realize they were loaded with judgment. I nodded and leaned against the wall. "Yeah, I have." She hesitated and added, "Isn't that a bit much?" That was when I decided to show her the photograph. I kept it. Printed it. Despite my promise to myself that I was done with Eleanor. But this one was not for her. It was for proof. I gave it to Donna across the table. It was the identical picture from Sarah's birthday, with everyone else clapping and celebrating, and Eleanor leaning into my ear, her mouth contorted as if she were spitting out a bitter truth. "She said Sarah would grow up ugly," I told Donna directly. "Like me." Donna stared down at the photograph and remained silent for a long time. I saw her eyes skim the edges, the faces, and the frozen moment of me in mid-smile, my body stiffening. I waited for a denial. The deflection. "You must have misheard her." But it didn't arrive. Not right away. Instead, she spoke almost too quietly. "I thought you looked happy in this one." I shook my head slowly, exhausted. "Do you really think I was?" She didn't respond. That quiet broke something in her. Not totally, not enough to rebuild trust, but enough to consider the possibility that I wasn't making it up. That maybe all those years I was accused of being the sensitive one, the delicate one, the one with too much emotion and too little humor. Maybe I was simply the one telling the truth too soon for anyone to believe it. Then the bomb dropped. That night, Eleanor made a Facebook post. This is not a private message. This is not a telephone call. A public status that all her friends, neighbors, elderly churchwomen, past co-workers, and barely active high school acquaintances could see. It reads, "My daughter has poisoned my relationship with my granddaughter. Pray for me during this painful time. Some people don't know what family means until it's too late." It was shared 17 times inside the first hour. People began to leave comments, sending her hugs and prayers, as well as anecdotes about their own children growing cold or entitled and rude. Some of them even mentioned forgiveness. A woman wrote, "You're still her mother. Don't give up on her yet." I read it all in startled silence, sitting in my kitchen with the lights turned out and the light from my phone searing into my eyes. My hands shook with a mixture of wrath, embarrassment, and something I couldn't quite name. Perhaps grief, for the tiny part of me that still wished she'd someday say, "I was wrong, you didn't deserve that." But she never would. Instead, she went nuclear. I considered leaving the post unanswered, allowing her to sink in her own martyrdom as I remained silent. But then I realized that quiet was what had kept me shackled for so damn long. She felt most comfortable speaking in silence, saying nothing in response to nasty comments. When memory was uncomfortable, we pretended it did not exist, expecting me to take every insult like communion. So I broke the silence with a single comment. Only one. "You should pray for the woman in that photo," I commented on her page. "She doesn't exist anymore." By morning, there had been over 200 comments. Some of them supported her, some of them backed me. But the ones that struck the deepest were asking, what really happened? For once she did not have control over the tale. Something shifted in that place of uncertainty, in the vacuum of well-built lies. Because folks may not have needed to know everything. Perhaps it was enough that she was no longer the only one speaking. Following the final confrontation, there is an unusual silence. When the ranting stops, the social media dust settles, and the door you close behind someone no longer rattles. Not because they stopped pushing, but because they eventually gave up. That was the solitude I awoke to on Thursday morning. A cup of coffee in one hand. Sarah crawled over the living room carpeting in her footy pajamas, her mouth eating something invisible and her little fingers smacking against blocks that no longer lit up like they once did. The world seemed quieter. Not quite peaceful, but hollowed down in a way I'd never felt before. It was the kind of silence you get after gutting a house, and the floors still echoed from what once lived there. I'd been thinking about the baby book for months, ever since Eleanor showed up with that present bag and Sarah shied away, as if her body knew better than to let the poison in. Something clicked for me that day. Something essential and definitive. It wasn't simply about eliminating my mother from the present. It was about denying her access to the future, ensuring that her shadow never crossed the barrier of Sarah's recollection. Because youngsters remember more than we realize. They recall the tone of voices, the stiffness in their mother's jaw, and how hands clench when the phone rings. I remembered. I recalled everything. And I wasn't about to let Sarah inherit that history of harm. So I started writing it by hand, which felt more traditional and spiritual than typing. I made my own baby book, with pastel pages and gendered questions. Brown leather, thick paper, stitched binding. I composed the narrative of Sarah's birth, her fingers curled around my thumb, as if she knew who I was. It was the first time she laughed at the dog's tail. She preferred sweet potatoes over carrots. I wrote about Rick installing her cot in the middle of the night while muttering under his breath, and how we debated whether or not to play white noise while she was sleeping. But I did not write about Eleanor. Not once. Not just a footnote. Not as a background character. Not as a name scribbled beside guests or presents. She was a ghost. And ghosts do not belong in infant books. Each page represented a little insurrection. Each line of ink was a means of saying, "You don't get to live here anymore." Rick observed me working on it in silence. He didn't ask any questions. Did not make any ideas. One night, he came over, took the finished book from my hands, and delicately placed it on the shelf above Sarah's changing table, as if it were holy. And perhaps it was. The next morning, Sarah toddled over to that shelf, pointing with one chubby finger. She glanced at me, her eyes wide and eager, and spoke her first proper sentence. Not one word. A sentence. "Nana gone." I did not cry. I did not flinch. I simply smiled, got down to her level, and said, "Yeah, baby. She is." It was not unkind. It was not even bitter. This was the truth. The simplest kind. The kind that doesn't require a story to back it up. Because Eleanor had not just departed from our lives. I had made sure she couldn't return. Like a whisper. As a twisted memory. As a ghost pretending to be family. I did not kill my mother. I simply removed the thought of her. For a while that was plenty. The quiet gathered around us like dust on a windowsill. Rick and I began sleeping better. Donna maintained her distance, unsure whether to embrace the silence or confront it. I didn't push her in any manner. Eleanor's absence provided me more breathing room, and I had no desire to fill it with past remorse or half-reconciled relationships. But 6 months later, a letter arrived. There's no return address. There was no postmark that I recognized. The envelope only had my name on it, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Not since Mother used to sign my permission slips with a long, irritated scroll. I considered burning it. I even held it over the sink for a bit, attempting to determine whether it was substantial enough to hold more than paper. But I did open it. There was a photograph inside. Me at 13. No makeup, bad braces. An oversized t-shirt and stringy hair put into a ponytail. I was smiling. Not a contrived smile, but a genuine, embarrassed, hopeful one. I had the impression that the person behind the camera adored me. On the back, she had scribbled only one line. "You were never ugly." I just didn't know how to love pretty things. No apologies. There's no explanation. Just one sentence. A confession laced with cowardice. The truth is too late to matter, and too early to forgive. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I miss her. Not because I thought she had changed. But I wanted to remember the girl in the photo. I wanted to remember that despite everything, I still thought I was worth capturing. Worth seeing. I did not write back. I did not call. I did not post an answer. But I did not throw away the photograph either. I kept it. Not for her. For me. To recall what I survived. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. If you thought that was bad, just wait, this next one is something else. Dad said I didn't need help, because I was strong, but gave my brother $625,000 until he lost it. Now they're begging me to fix their mistakes. I was forgotten as an elder sibling since my parents put their trust in my younger brother. Please stay until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My name is Elio. I am 30 years old and manage my own technology startup. It's not a big corporation, but it allows me to live comfortably and possess what I need. I have 2 houses. One that I live in and one that I rent out. I'm not wealthy enough to spend recklessly, yet I make enough money to not be concerned. Now there is Henry, my younger brother. In our home, he has always been the center of attention. He's intelligent, has a way with words, and knows how to persuade others of his great ambitions. But he's not practical. Henry is constantly jumping from one huge idea to the next. One day it's a tech business, the next a fine restaurant, and finally a movie studio. His ambitions seem fantastic, but he never completes them. He always finds someone or something to blame, such as a lack of funds or a refusal to invest in his ideas. Then 1 year ago, I discovered something that surprised me. My parents had taken out a loan on their house to give Henry a large sum of money to start another business venture. That's when things started to fall apart. My parents are the type of folks that feel that families should always support one another, no matter what. They are not awful people, but they make one major mistake. They always believe Henry, no matter what. My father is serious and silent. He's always the one who makes decisions around the house. He's never really respected what I've built, perhaps because I didn't follow the path he expected. To him, true success entails something large and flashy, not the modest software business I founded with my own efforts. My mother is gentler and more sensitive, Yet she allows her emotions to guide her thoughts. To her, Henry is the one who still requires assistance. I'm the one who is already doing well and doesn't require assistance. She always encourages me. You're strong, you can manage on your own. But Henry needs his family. We don't have much money, but we've always been okay. My father owned a modest business, while my mother worked as an accountant. Their jobs provided us with a solid life. Furthermore, my grandfather left a large sum of money from wise property investments. If handled wisely, that money could have provided my parents with a lifetime of support. When I was little, I didn't believe they picked favorites. I assumed they loved both Henry and me equally. We had a shared birthday party. If I got a toy, he got one too. We both got new outfits during the holidays. Everything seemed equitable and fair. But when Henry started school, things began to change. Henry did really well. He received high marks and was liked by everyone. The teachers appreciated him. Other children liked him. My parents were so pleased with him that they eventually forgot I was there as well. It manifested itself not in toys or meals, but rather in larger events that shaped our futures. Henry wanted to learn French. They paid for pricey classes with no second thoughts. He wanted to go to a nice camp, and they said yes. He wanted to play the piano, so they bought one and paid for a private teacher. What about me? I never received that level of assistance. By high school, it was evident. Henry stated that he wanted to attend a prestigious private school. They paid the full price without thinking. I also requested to attend a better school, but my mother just stated, "Public schools are fine, son. There is no need to waste money." I was not clueless. I knew exactly what was going on. They believed that investing in Henry would yield significant returns in the future. They didn't bother because they assumed I was already fine and didn't require assistance. When I was 17, I discovered I enjoyed dealing with computers. I wanted to take an online course to learn how to create software. It didn't cost much, just a fraction of what my parents had previously paid for Henry's courses. But when I mentioned it, my father shook his head saying, "You can learn coding on your own. There's no need to spend money on it." I was used to doing things by myself, so I kept silent. I spent the entire summer researching free resources on the internet, learning every bit of code and process on my own. There are no professors or money from home. Only myself. After going through similar experiences several times, I finally understood what hurt. My parents never truly believed in me. To them, Henry was the one worth investing money and time on. I was just the child they assumed didn't need anything. I've never blamed Henry. It was not his fault. But from that day forward, I gave up hope that my parents would ever support me. After graduating from college, I worked for 2 years straight, saving every penny I could. By the time I was 25, I had saved enough money to start a small technology business. However, in order to expand, I required an additional $65,000 in funding. I considered my options carefully before deciding to seek assistance from my parents. I don't enjoy asking for things. I did not want free money. I was prepared to accept it like a loan, even signing a contract to repay it all. Still, I couldn't stop thinking, if Henry had been assisted so many times, why couldn't I ask only once? So I asked my parents for a large sum of money for the first time. I recall the day well. I sat in front of them and presented my company proposal in a serious and respectful manner. I had done my study, acquired competent business partners, and was completely prepared to be accountable for every single dollar. But only a few minutes in, my father stopped me and said, "No, it's too risky. It's too unsafe." I glanced at him, expecting he'd explain further, but he didn't. He wasn't interested in my ideas and didn't inquire about the effort I had put in. To him, whatever I did was a horrible decision. But when Henry tried something, it was a dream worth supporting. I did not argue. I gave a small, mournful grin and nodded. I wasn't surprised, yet I still felt disappointed. Even though I didn't get the $65,000, I didn't give up. I utilized my savings to establish the business anyway. It meant slower growth than I had intended. But I made prudent financial decisions and seized every opportunity to improve. It began as a small team of people working from home. I worked non-stop, sometimes until I was very exhausted. But I never quit. Nobody believed in me, but I trusted myself, and I finally succeeded. By 29, my company was doing nicely. I wasn't simply living a steady life. I'd also purchased 2 residences, one for myself and one to rent out. Both were in wonderful communities, and made me feel more confident about the future. I performed all of this with no support from my parents, or anyone else. I earned all I own. But I kept wondering how much money my parents had spent on Henry. When Henry was 23, he opened his own cafe, similar to those seen in Europe. My parents gave him more than $120,000 to aid him. He chose a prime location in the city center, outfitted it with elegant tables and chairs, and employed employees as if it were a premium restaurant. However, after just 8 months, the cafe closed. Henry had no understanding how to manage money, how to run a business, and most importantly, he never accepted responsibility for what went wrong. So, what did my parents say after the cafe failed? The economy is really hard right now. Our sweet boy deserves another try. Of course, another attempt. When he turned 25, he decided to try his hand at fashion. Another $65,000 vanished to build a small business selling unique clothing. This time, the store closed after only half a year. What's the reason? He knew nothing about clothing. But that did not deter him. Henry had always assumed that he was a genius that no one had discovered yet. I assumed that was the last time my folks helped him. But no, they kept trusting in him. That's when I finally realized the truth. My parents preferred me since I was not hazardous. They said no, because they never truly believed I merited their trust. Then, 1 year ago, I discovered something that rocked me to the core. I was in the historic section of town on a quick errand. On the way back, I planned to pay a visit to my parents. I didn't notify them I was coming. I figured I'd pop by briefly and say hello. But as soon as I came up to the house, something caught my eye. A brand new BMW parked in the driveway. I stared at it. My parents are not the kind to spend a lot of money, so where did this car come from? The front door opened, and my mother emerged with a big smile. She cheerfully exclaimed, "Henry just got a new car. Isn't it amazing?" I stood still, absolutely stunned. A BMW? With what money? Henry had failed repeatedly. He couldn't afford something so pricey. When I entered the house, I attempted to remain cool. But then I noticed a pile of bank paperwork on the table. I grabbed them up and started reading. My chest tightened. It was a mortgage loan for $625,000. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. The loan covered 80% of the home's value. My parents had placed their house on the line. But for what? Why do you borrow so much? I clutched the papers hard, attempting to keep my voice steady. You used the house to get a loan? I inquired calmly. My father frowned. My mother would not look at me. We only took out a small loan to help Henry, she explained calmly, as if it were nothing unusual. I gave a dry laugh. A small loan? I looked at the number again. $625,000. That was 80% of your home's value. That's small? What about the money Grandpa left? I asked him. My mother paused and exhaled slowly. That money? It's already gone, she explained. Gone? I repeated, repeating each letter as if it pained. I looked back at the BMW outside. I already knew the truth. You spent it on Henry's car, didn't you? They did not speak. My mother bit her lip. My father gave me a frigid look, as if I had said something disrespectful. He needed that car, my father remarked forcefully. In business, how people see you matters. Who would take you seriously if you show up in a normal car? I smiled. Not because anything was humorous, but because the scenario was so terribly ridiculous. You used up all the savings, spent the inheritance, purchased him a car, and now you've used your home to get a loan so he can have even more money for another plan. Do you even see how dangerous that is? If Henry messes up again, you'll have no place left to stay. Their faces transformed immediately. My mother looked at me angrily, and my father's voice grew rough and cold. You envy your brother, don't you? He asked. You want him to lose just so you can feel above him? I stood still. Envy? I repeated, unwilling to believe what I had heard. You seriously think I envy someone who has thrown away this family's money again and again and has never once taken any blame? They could not perceive the truth. I took a long breath and attempted to remain cool, But then I remembered something and went to my father. When I was 25, I asked you for a $65,000 loan to launch my company. Do you remember? I replied. You instantly said no. You called it too risky. And now you're fine with putting the house on the line for Henry? Has he ever succeeded? Even once? I'm really let down by both of you. My father slammed his drinking glass on the table with a loud thud. That happened years ago and you're doing fine now, he stated firmly. But Henry needs help. Stop bringing up the past to attack this family. He stood up hurriedly and gestured to the entryway. Leave. If all you're going to do is complain, then don't come back. I glanced at them for a few seconds. Then I put the loan documents on the table, nodded, and walked away. While driving home, I took up the phone and contacted Henry. Even though I was angry at our parents, I wanted to try to prevent him from making another major mistake. Henry, please listen. You're going the wrong way, I replied. Mom and Dad have risked everything for you. If you fail again, they're going to lose it all. Don't you see that? Instead of listening to me, Henry chuckled in a phony, mocking tone. You always do this, Elio. You're just jealous. You're scared I'll be more successful than you, and now you're trying to stop me. I went quiet. You really think that? I inquired calmly. What else could it be? He said with a scoff. You already have everything. A company, houses, money. And now that I finally have a shot, you can't take it. You're just being selfish. I didn't say anything for a few moments. Then I shook my head. If that's what you believe, there's nothing else I can say. I hung up the phone. This time, I completely gave up. A week passed without any contact. Then, out of nowhere, my parents called and invited me over for supper. I didn't expect that, especially so soon after our quarrel. Regardless of what had transpired, they were still my family, so I agreed to pay them a visit. When I arrived, I noticed Henry was already there. The atmosphere in the room was different, less tense than before. My parents glanced at me and my father spoke first. Elio, we're sorry. We said some things that weren't right last time. My mother nodded, her voice softer than normal. Henry also wants to apologize. I looked at Henry. He gave a slight nod and touched the back of his head. Yeah, I was kind of angry that day. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was shocked. My parents had never apologized to me before, and Henry had never admitted to being wrong. For a brief moment, I wondered whether they had finally understood. But less than 60 seconds later, I realized what this supper was actually about. My father coughed faintly, then began to talk slowly. Elio, you've got 2 properties. One is where you live, and the other one you lease. I could tell right away that something was awry. Why are you bringing this up? I inquired, my tone growing colder. My mother stepped in, her voice calm, as if she were saying something very natural. Henry is stepping into the real estate world. He needs to appear trustworthy. A good place to stay would help his image. If you could let him have one of your houses, it would be a big help for his future. I sat in disbelief. So that was it. The apologies had merely served to set up this ridiculous request. I responded immediately, looking directly at them. No. My mother blinked, as if she could not believe what I had just said. What do you mean, Elio? She inquired, remaining kind but sounding more apprehensive. I mean, I'm not giving Henry my property. I'm not foolish. The entire mood shifted instantaneously. My father lowered his chopsticks with a loud noise, his expression hardening. Elio, you have 2 places to stay. Henry only needs 1 break. He's your brother. I gave out a sour laugh. So what now? You expect me to give up my home just so he can look successful? How many times have you thrown money at him, even though he's never once achieved anything? My father's tone became stronger. He hasn't failed. He just hasn't gotten the right moment yet. And you already have it all. Can't you support him just this one time? I laughed again, but this time it sounded dry and hollow. Have everything? You never gave me anything at all. Even when I asked for $65,000 to build my company, you said no right away. And now you think I should give Henry a whole house? I'm not out of my mind. My mother's hand started shaking. My father slammed his hand against the table, making the water in the cups quiver. So you're just selfish like the rest. You envy your own brother. You're scared he might become more successful than you. Isn't that it? I rose up abruptly, my eyes full with disappointment. I'm just not dumb. Silence engulfed the room. I looked toward Henry. He still hadn't spoken, and his gaze was fixed on the ground. I knew deep down that if I'd agreed to give him that house, he'd take it immediately. He would not have thought twice. He didn't mind stealing what wasn't his. I shook my head, feeling ill rather than angry. You can keep putting your faith in him if you want. I don't. I walked out of my former home without saying anything else. My father's furious voice screamed behind me. If you leave now, don't ever come back. I did not stop. This time, I left them for good. As expected, Henry failed again a few months later. My parents did not mention it to me. Henry did not inform me either. I discovered it through someone I know who worked in real estate. Elio, did you hear? Henry's business went under. I paused, grasping my phone tightly. What went wrong? I inquired, despite knowing the answer inside. He picked the wrong deal. He bought when the price was high and sold when it dropped. Lost it all. That money from the mortgage your parents took? Gone. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. I wasn't astonished. It was going to happen sooner or later, but there was more. What about the BMW? I inquired, though I already had a horrible feeling. He sold it 2 months ago, my pal explained. He needed money to keep things going, but it didn't help for long. I let forth a flat, joyless laugh. My parents had gambled everything on Henry. They were certain he was intended to win. But now there's no money, no business, and no car. Soon, there will be no roof above their heads. What was my emotional state at the time? Not proud. Not joyful. The inside is just blank. I'd warned them. I'd attempted to make them see. But they ignored me. I already knew what would happen next. They'd reach out to me. My phone kept calling a few hours after I heard about Henry's firm failing, just as I expected. My mom made the initial call. I didn't respond. Then another, then dozens more. Messages came in non-stop. Elio, answer please. We need you. Please don't leave us alone. I saw each communication but did not respond. I understood exactly what they were asking for. I knew this would happen as soon as they applied for a loan on their home. They weren't messaging to apologize. They were looking for financial support. The following morning, I stepped outdoors to go to work. I paused abruptly. My parents and Henry stood in front of my door. They appeared worse than ever before. Henry had lost his normal pride. His face appeared thin and worn. No fancy clothing. There is no proud corporate mindset. He looked like he'd lost everything. My mother looked like she'd been crying for hours. My father, who was previously robust and proud, now appeared much older, as if stress had accelerated his aging. They had nothing left. My father cleared his throat and spoke with a hoarse, weak voice. Elio, we were wrong. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorway, my expression chilly. Now you get it. They did not argue. No yelling. Don't call me selfish or jealous. Because they needed me now. My mother began speaking, her voice weak. Son, we're out of options. Please help us. I sighed and stopped her. I don't have any cash. They froze, but my father responded instantly as if he had already practiced it. You could sell your company or one of your homes. If we can cover what we owe and keep the old house, we'll be able to begin again. I gave him a brief look. Then I laughed, not because it was hilarious but because I couldn't believe what I had heard. They truly assumed I'd sell the firm I founded to save them. These same folks had refused to lend me $65,000 when I wanted to pursue my passion. Now they wanted me to give up everything I'd built for them. They cut me out. They said no. And now they asked me to lose everything for them. I had nothing else to contribute. I stood tall, walked forward, and opened the door wide. I then pointed outside. Leave my home. Nobody moved. Henry opened his lips to speak, but I interrupted him. I told you, I'm not a fool. I had nothing more to say. 1 month later, the bank took over their old residence. They had to pack things and leave. They had lost their home and were now homeless. I was not surprised. I saw it coming the day they signed the loan. They started out staying with people they knew, but no one could keep them for long. They later moved into small, low-cost hotel rooms that were dark, wet, and overcrowded. When their money ran out, they ended up in shelters, waiting in line for meals. These were the same parents who formerly had a nice house and enough money to live comfortably. Now they were members of the group that had lost everything. And Henry, the man who once referred to himself as a businessman and drove a BMW, was suddenly broke. He walked around looking for work, but no one wanted to hire someone who had failed repeatedly. Even though I told myself I didn't care anymore, I observed them quietly from a distance. I did not contact them, but I knew how they were doing. Even though I tried not to feel anything, I couldn't completely turn away. For 3 months, I let them experience what it meant to lose everything. I wanted them to feel the consequences of their choices. But deep down, the sensation of being their kid prevented me from watching indefinitely. Even if they treated me harshly or shut me out, they were still my parents. About a month ago, I made up my decision. I would go visit them. They appeared absolutely defeated. My father, who formerly walked proudly, dropped his head when I entered. My mother seemed exhausted. Her eyes had shadows from sleepless nights, and her hair was grayer than I remembered. Henry sat off to the side. He was no longer full of confidence. He wasn't the type of man who boasted about his lofty goals and ambitious intentions. Nobody spoke for a while. Finally, I spoke up. I will rent a small place for you. It'll be enough to live near the city, but only for 1 year. My mother lifted her head. Her expression conveyed a hint of hope. But I wasn't finished. During that year, Henry has to get work. And after those 12 months, you're on your own. I won't give more help. My father said nothing back. My mother didn't plead. They both understood they had no right to ask for anything else. Henry opened his mouth, perhaps to complain or to question, but for the first time, my father raised his hand and stopped him. He gave me a long look before slowly nodding. That was the first time I had seen him recognize his faults. You're probably asking why I just provided assistance for 1 year. Here's why. Henry still lives with them, and I won't let him rely on me. For years he's gotten used to having someone else handle his difficulties. But this time, if he wants a true life, he must earn it for himself. If my parents can care for themselves in a year, that's great. If they cannot, I will have Henry depart. After that, I will just pay rent to ensure that my parents do not end up on the street. But Henry will no longer be my job. That is my final decision. Now I'd like to ask you, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you continue to help them? Or would you let them deal with the consequences of their actions? Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Unbelievable, right? Well, the drama doesn't stop there. Here's another one for you. My mom used me to plan my sister's dream wedding, then erased me from the guest list. So I showed up at the rehearsal with receipts. You're not coming to the wedding, Mom texted. Mia's family doesn't want you there. That was it. No sorry, or, I hope you understand. Just harsh white letters on a gray bubble. I read it twice, then again. My fingers hesitated over the screen as my coffee cooled beside me. So you chose status over blood. I texted it. No emoji, no sarcasm, just the truth. Then, without hesitation, I opened my laptop, signed into the wedding planner's account, and canceled the venue deposit. It was in my name and paid with my card. They didn't even realize it. What is the best part? It was non-refundable. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the wall. I didn't feel angry yet. Not even sad. Just be still. As if something inside me had swapped positions and was now seeing from a different perspective. They have done this before. Not as a parent, not in all caps. But I felt it in the side glances, the jokes at dinners, and the fact that they forgot my birthday 3 years in a row and blamed the group chat algorithm. The way Mia became the daughter they had always desired, while I remained simply Jack. Always handy, always silent. I helped select the dress boutique. I arranged the first catering agreement. I discovered Airbnb for out-of-town guests. When Zach's parents complained that the Colorado Lodge was too rustic, I discovered a luxury equivalent with lake views. I also designed the Save the Date website. They used my Canva account. I still had the login. But now I was a burden since Mia's father disliked the energy I provided. I wore black to breakfast. Because I asked where the $3,000 catering money went and didn't give up when Mom answered, "Just trust us." They always needed me, until they didn't. They were now arranging their picture-perfect family tableau without me. Curated smiles. Filtered bliss. No, Jack. Just the people who matter. I took a big breath and opened our shared folder. Mia and Zach wedding planning. I browsed through the images, contracts, and vendor schedules. Then I deleted every file I had posted. All 63 of them. The folder was renamed, "Good Luck Without Me." I did not tell anyone. I did not warn them. Allow them to find out in the morning when they try to confirm the florist. Allow them to scramble while the photographer isn't present. Let them wonder what happened when the venue sent them an email saying, "Unfortunately, this reservation has been canceled by the account holder." They assumed I'd remain silent. Smile. Swallow it like you always do. But this was not about the wedding. This was the last fracture in something that had been sitting for years. They handed me the scissors, expecting me not to cut the rope. They wanted me gone. Wish granted. They didn't realize I'd take everything with me when I went. And I was only getting started. If you ask them, I was always the dramatic type. The person who overreacted. Who overthinks things. But let me explain how I became that guy. Let's go back to 6 months ago. It was Friday night. Mia called me in tears. Zach had been laid off. The apartment they rented downtown was 3 months late. They attempted to negotiate with the landlord, but he demanded the money. All of it. Or he would file eviction proceedings on Monday. I did not even hesitate. I transferred $3,800 from my savings account and instructed her to call me if she needed anything extra. That was the third time that year I'd helped them out. The first occurred when Dad unintentionally overdrew from his retirement account and required $5,000 to avoid fines. The second occurred when Mom forgot that Mia's bachelorette Airbnb was on my credit card and allowed the girls to wreck the place. I maintained spreadsheets. I saved screenshots. Not because I intended to use them, but because I needed to convince myself that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't anticipated the steady bleed of money, time, and energy into a family who treated me as if I were a silent giver. But it wasn't just about money. It was how I was regarded after I assisted. As a servant, a backstage hand. While I was fixing his gutters in the middle of a thunderstorm, Dad joked that I should work as a house husband, because I definitely wasn't man enough to be the breadwinner. Everyone laughed, even Mia. When I brought it up later, my mother said I was being overly sensitive. He said he was just old school. Old school? In high school, that man locked me out of the house because I had come home wearing eyeliner. But okay. Maybe I was overly sensitive. Mia told me about her engagement over FaceTime, while Mom and Dad were seated behind her on the couch cheering. They had helped her prepare the proposal with Zach. We even went ring shopping with him. Me? I discovered out via a screen. I should have spotted the pattern. But a part of me remained hopeful that if I helped enough, they'd finally treat me like I mattered. I paid $600 for the engagement shoot, developed the wedding website. I made unique invitations. I paid a deposit for the venue because Mom's card was acting weird. I was building their fantasy brick by brick, while they gave me leftovers and called me a good sport. And then the texting began. Aunt Megan initially said, "Hey, I heard you're not invited to the ceremony. Is that true?" Uncle Jeff then said, "Did you say anything to Zach's dad?" Just curious. Finally, the Facebook post that broke my heart. A photo of Mia and Zach with my parents standing in front of a rustic barn filled with fairy lights. The caption read, "So proud of our family. Can't wait for the big day with all the right people by our side." I was not even tagged. I browsed through the comments. One of Mia's friends inquired, "Is Jack going to be there?" He was always so funny. Mia responded, "We're keeping things small. Just people we trust." That night, I did not sleep. I read through every receipt, every communication, and every time they labeled me selfish for requesting a refund. And I understood something. I was the only person in this family who gave without expecting anything in return, and I was the only one who did not receive anything in return. A few days afterwards, I received a group text. "Hi family. Can everyone pitch in for Mia's bridal shower decorations? Jack, Since you're so good with websites, can you make a landing page for RSVPs? Hugs and kisses. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, Mia messaged me directly, asking, "Can you just do this one thing without being passive-aggressive?" So I did something different. I got into the wedding venue's account and sought a refund for the $2,500 deposit. It was legally non-refundable, but I had purchased wedding insurance during the booking process just in case. No one spotted the small checkbox. They repaid me 90% after I made a family conflict claim. Then I went into Canva and erased all of my designs, including RSVPs, table assignments, and welcome signs. I made a new file called Ask Zach's Dad to Fix This, which I shared with the entire family. That's when everything started to go wrong. 3 hours later, Mom called distraught. "What are you doing? Do you know how this looks?" I responded, "I do. That's why I'm doing it." Then Dad called. He skipped right to ranting. "You've always been jealous of Mia. That's what this is. You couldn't stand her having a better life than you." I hung up while holding the phone away from my ear. That night, my phone exploded. Mia wrote in her Instagram story, "Betrayal always comes from those closest to you." Mom then shared a photo of Mia crying with the remark, "Nothing hurts more than your own brother trying to ruin your special day." People began messaging me, friends and cousins. Some texted, "Are you okay?" Most people did not ask. They just responded, "Why would you ruin her wedding?" I did not respond to any of them. Then I received the package, a yellow envelope with no return address. Inside is a printed screenshot, an inside messaging thread from Mia's bridesmaid group chat. She couldn't stop laughing. "We'll get Jack to pay for the cake too. Just guilt him about being the only brother. Works every time." A different message followed. "Zach doesn't even like him. He said Jack gives him the creeps. LOL. One more thing. He won't be at the wedding. I'll make sure of it. Watch." There was a sticky note on top with the handwriting I recognized. "You deserve better. K." I wasn't sure who K was, but I'd find out. And when I did, everything changed. K had more than screenshots. K had audio. And the moment I heard it, I knew precisely what I was going to do for Mia's rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner was held at a posh winery 30 minutes outside of town. They termed it rustic luxury. I dubbed it a marketing ploy with pricey wine and fairy lights affixed to the trees. But I did show up. Dressed neatly, calm, focused, because I did not come to eat. I came to bury the circus. I walked in just as they were toasting. Mia was in the middle of laughing. Zach had his arm around her. Dad appeared uncomfortable. Mom avoided my gaze. They clearly did not expect me to show up. I intended to play the villain in their script. The spiteful sibling who damaged everything and refused to let go. But I was not bitter. I was finished. I stepped directly to the front of the room. "Sorry to interrupt," I murmured, tapping a glass. Conversations froze. Someone laughed awkwardly. Mia frowned. I removed a little speaker from my jacket and set it on the table. I then held up a flash disk. Zach stood up. "What are you doing?" I looked at him. "Giving you exactly what you deserve." I hit play. "The speaker is on. Turn the volume up." A girl's voice. Mia was chuckling. "We'll get Jack to pay for the cake too. Just guilt him about being the only brother. Works every time." The quiet broke. Mouths opened. Someone gave a gasp. The fork clattered. I did not flinch. Another voice. A different note. "Zach doesn't even like him. He said Jack gives him the creeps. Lol." Zach became white. Mia lunged at the speaker. I stepped in front of it. "Sit down." It was not a request. Then came the last clip. Mia says quietly and smugly, "He won't be at the wedding. I'll make sure of it. Watch." I pressed pause and looked around the room. "Any questions?" Zach opened his mouth and then closed it again. My father stood up, infuriated. "You think this is appropriate? You think this—" "Sit down," I snapped. For the first time in my life he did. I turned to Mia. "I spent over $11,000 on this wedding. I designed your website, negotiated your venue, and paid your florist. I did it because I thought, stupidly, that this was family." Mia was shaking. Her mascara streaked down one cheek. You don't understand it. No, I replied. You don't. You never did. You didn't want a brother. You wanted a wallet. Then I pulled out the folder, which contained hard copies, screenshots, and all of her, mom and dad's texts. The PayPal receipts, the invoices I paid, and the ones I preserved when others forgot. The group conversation where Mia introduced me as the family's free wedding planner. I gave them to Zach. You still want to marry her? I inquired. He stared at the pages. No response. A woman in a gray coat stood up from the back. She carried a badge around her neck and a phone in her palm. Hello everyone, sorry for intruding, she remarked. I'm Kristen. Jack and I used to work together. I also run a digital forensic agency. Jack asked me to verify some files. She gazed at Mia. And to confirm they weren't deep fakes. She held up her phone. This audio? It's 100% authentic. No edits, no splices. Pulled from a WhatsApp backup linked to your old number. Don't worry, I have the metadata too. Mia's mouth dropped open. Mom gave a gasp. Is this a joke? Dad demanded. Kristen smiled. Not even a little. Then came the twist. Zach turned to face Mia. You told me Jack said those things to you. That he threatened you. That he was unstable. He brought up the printouts. You lied. She reaches for his arm. No, Zach, don't touch me. Then the room exploded. My aunt stood up and began ranting. Someone knocked over the glass. My mother attempted to say something but choked. And through it all, I stood there, silent and serene, watching it burn. When the commotion reached its peak, I lifted my voice one final time. I'm not coming to the wedding. You already made that decision. But now, you can do it without my money, my help, or my silence. I turned to my parents. You cut me out the moment you realized I wouldn't play the puppet anymore, so I'm cutting the strings too. Then, as I turned to go, Zach spoke. I'm calling it off, he said, loud, clear. Mia screamed, a harsh, sharp sound that pierced the air like glass. You can't do this here. Oh, I replied, he just did. Then I walked out. No dramatic music, there's no slow motion, just the sound of everything they'd built falling behind me. I did not drive home following the rehearsal dinner. I didn't even get onto the freeway. Instead, I drove a side road north that was quiet and had no reception. A month before, I had signed a lease on a small home in a neglected region of the state. The population is 600. A single diner. One gas station. Nobody cared who I was. That is precisely why I chose it. I paid for 6 months in advance. No forwarding address. There are no digital breadcrumbs. Just silent. For the first 3 days I did not switch on my phone. I didn't check my emails. I did not speak to anyone. I sat on the porch with a thermos of black coffee, listening to birds squabble for territory they'd never claim. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free. My neck no longer feels tense. No more guilt. No one approached me for money. Nobody pretended to love me just long enough to get a transfer. On day 4, I went into town and enrolled in an archival preservation course at the local college, which I had previously been too humiliated to pursue. History. Dusty newspapers. Letters were forgotten. Finally, I was surrounded by records that were preserved accurately. There was no performance here. There was no manipulation. No. You owe us. I volunteered at the county museum. Helped to catalog images from the 1950s. Repaired an antique microfilm machine. And for once, I didn't care if no one noticed. It was mine. Quietly mine. About a week later, the messages began to arrive in my old Gmail inbox, which was tied to my emergency phone. I didn't read the first couple, but the subject line was clear enough. Can we just talk? You went too far. We're still family. Next followed the blocked calls, dozens. I left the phone turned off. They were not attempting to make peace. They tried to reset the game. What terrified them was not the evidence. It was the silence. They couldn't take not knowing what I'd do next. Because for the first time, they weren't in control. 3 weeks later, a court notification was delivered to my old flat. Apparently my father had attempted to sell a section of the family land. What he didn't comprehend was that I had locked the deed 2 years ago when he unintentionally tried to remortgage it without my permission. I had left it in legal limbo, waiting. He activated the provision himself. As a result, his business transaction fell through. His buyer walked away, prompting a fraud inquiry. Not because I caused it, but because I did not stop it. I did not publish a blog. I did not post a spectacular expose. I didn't send screenshots to the group chat. I just disappeared. There were no birthday calls. There is no financial rescue. No maybe next time. That is what truly ruined them. Because narcissists do not fear the repercussions. They are afraid of being irrelevant. They are afraid of being on stage without an audience. One morning I walked to the post office. Not for mail, but for a tiny item that I had ordered. Someone behind me in line was talking on the phone. Put it this way. I heard Mia's fiancé walked out before the wedding even happened. Then apparently her brother disappeared. Took all his money with him. I did not turn around. I never gave a statement. Never clarified anything. I simply became inaccessible. No address, no number, no access. They believed that quiet indicated weakness. They had no idea it was an option. A silent surgical type of goodbye. Not in words, but in their absence. The kind of absence that cannot be altered. The kind that makes people sit with the consequences of what they did. They can't make me feel guilty anymore. They are unable to contact when the rent is late, or the credit card is maxed. They can't pretend everything is fine when they need another favor. Because there is no longer a we. There is only them, and a mailbox that reads, "No messages received." Do you know what's funny? When you ultimately walk away from the people who have constructed their life on top of you, they do not tumble instantly. They merely stood there shocked, as if someone had turned off the sound and they couldn't find the volume button. That is what happened. Even after everything had burned down, after the rehearsal, after the calls, after the silence, they remained hopeful that I would return. Because I always have. But this time I didn't. I changed my phone number. Not just a SIM card replacement, new carrier, new country code. No forwarding. There's no auto reply. Just nothing. I closed the joint account that Dad had set up with me for emergencies. I moved my bank statements to a private digital vault. I updated my medical power of attorney. I removed all family names. I even updated the emergency contact information on my driver's license from mom to nobody. They do not know where I live. They do not know where I work. They're not sure if I'm in the state, the country, or even above ground. And this kills them. I returned a month ago, but only once. Not to the house. Not to the vineyard. I drove by the wedding venue, which I had canceled. It was vacant. Abandoned. A for sale sign hung crookedly on the front gate. A faded bouquet lay crushed on the stones. It felt right. I rolled down the windows. The breeze smelt of rain and melancholy. Before leaving, I did one thing. I strolled to the mailbox at the main entrance and dropped off a little envelope. There's no return address. Inside is a printout of the last wedding invoice I paid, with a post-it note on top. It said, "Thanks for nothing." I have stopped checking the old email. But every now and then, I log in to observe the flood. One unopened message was labeled, "Please just talk to us." I did not open it. Another one. "We don't know who you are anymore." That one made me smile. Because finally they're correct. I am not the person that paid their debts at 3 a.m. I am not the emergency contact. I am not the wedding planner, free therapist, unseen sibling, or guilt-ridden son. I'm just a guy living a different life now. One that they cannot reach, corrupt, or rewrite. I received a new mailbox last week. Metal, clean, lockable. One of those security drop boxes that won't let anything out once it's inside. The technician asked what name I wanted inscribed on the plate. I replied, "No name, just a message." So now on a small metal rectangle immediately beneath the keyhole it says, "This box does not accept apologies." And what about the stillness I'm hearing every day now? Peace. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story.